Hey, this is Jimmy Jam. You're listening and watching On That Note with Sean Stockman.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to On That Note, the podcast where we speak the language we all understand, and that's music. My guest for today is one half of the most successful writer-producers in music. Alongside partner Terry Lewis, has won 5 Grammys, written 41 top 10 hits in the U.S., and please correct me if any of these stats are not right.
Okay.
Just,
if I can remember.
Okay, cool.
I'll take your word for it.
Okay, all right, cool. They're good enough.
Yep.
And has more Billboard #1 hits than any other songwriting production team in history. They've sold over 100 gold, platinum, multi-platinum, and diamond albums, written and produced for and with Janet Jackson, including What Have You Done For Me Lately, Nasty When I Think of You, Let's Wait a While, and Control, all from her breakthrough 1986 album, Control. They also wrote or co-wrote other joints, including #1s for the likes of The Human League, one of my favorite songs, Human. George Michael, Monkey. We're going to get into that. I never knew you did that.
Mm-hmm.
I never knew that. Karen White, Romantic. Some guys from Philadelphia. This group, they did a song called On Bended Knee and 4 Seasons of Loneliness. And just to name very, very few. Other artists who have recorded their songs include Mary J. Blige, No More Drama, Yolanda Adams, Open My Heart, Michael Jackson, Scream alongside his sister Janet, Sounds of Blackness, Optimistic, New Edition, Can't Stand the Rain, SOS Band, Just Be Good to Me. I could go on and on and on and on. One of the coolest men alive and one of the greatest demo singers I have ever heard.
Uh-oh.
We're going to get into that. Ladies and gentlemen, please give it up for my family, Mr. James Samuel Harris III. A.K.A. Jimmy Jam.
Wow. All right, thanks and good night.
Yeah, right. Dude, I could have
We're
kept...
not taking up the whole show with that
kept
intro.
going. I could have kept going.
That intro was beautiful.
Thank you.
You missed a few things, but that's okay.
You know what? I tried to cram as much as I could. But we'll get into those few things.
Okay.
How about that? We'll just kind of touch on those few things. I just have to say that the training wheels are off, ladies and gentlemen. My partner, Brian, who normally you hear his voice occasionally on previous podcasts, has gracefully bowed out of that position. He said, I'm good. He's like, Sean, I think you've grown into a man. You can do this pod by yourself.
You mean you went from boys to men?
Exactly. See how all this is. Yes.
We're
vibing. We'll be here all week. And so you'll be hearing just me. And you might hear him occasionally. I don't think he's going to give it up completely, but we'll see. Jimmy, thank you.
Thank you, brother.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for having this.
Yeah.
This beautiful show, man.
I've always wanted to do a podcast, and I guess as we talked off air, like God's timing.
Mm-hmm.
Like I've always wanted to do it, and I just so happened to meet this incredible partner of mine, Brian, who saw the vision, believed in me, and said, hey, let's do it.
Yep.
And I was like, cool. And I've been having the time of my life. I've been able to talk to some of my dearest friends and some who I never met, but learned a lot from. And now they're my friends as well.
Mm-hmm.
And just hearing these stories, some of which I've heard before and some which I never heard.
Mm-hmm.
So this is more of a fulfillment for me too. Like to actually talk to amazing human beings like yourself and get the inside scoop and learn some things that will enrich my life. So again, and Jimmy, our history. So every time that we get together, there's always a conversation. There's always something that I get from it. So again, this is going to be a good one, folks. So buckle up. But again, thank you. As I like to do with all of my guests, and I tell my viewing and listening audience to do this, I want everybody to close their eyes, okay? Because Mr. Harris here is going to do a segment that I like to call, we're going to go back, way back in the time. All right? So Mr. Harris is going to take us back to Minneapolis. You were about 7 or 8 years old. We're going back that far.
Wow.
Yeah,
okay.
we're going back that far, Jimmy.
Ooh,
okay?
right.
You wake up, you wipe the coal from your eye, and you head to see what's going on in the house with the rest of the family.
Mm-hmm.
What music was playing in your living room that was integral in creating who we now know as one of the greatest producers of our time? Because that's what it's about. It starts when you were a little seed.
Wow. Okay.
So let us know, what music did you listen to? What inspired you?
Well, okay. That's a great question. No,
Mhm.
nobody has ever asked me that question before.
That's good. See, you only get this on that note.
Which means I've never answered it before.
There
So
you
let
go.
me
So
see.
take your time. Take your
Okay, let
time.
me see. Let me see. So 7, 8 years old.
Mhm.
So what I remember was I had by my bed I had a Sears back in the days when Sears was around.
Yes.
I had this Sears. It was a base station,
Okay.
and it had AM radio, and it had but it had CB, so you could like talk to like walkie talkies and that kind
Yes.
of. And it
Yes.
had a little thing on the side that had a little for Morse code.
Yes.
Right.
I remember those.
Okay.
I remember
So
those.
okay, so that was what was by my bed.
Mhm.
So every day when I'd wake up, I'd hear there were 2 pop stations because there was really no black radio in Minnesota when I was growing up.
We're gonna get into that. That's
Yeah,
interesting.
yeah. So the music I heard was all back in that day. It was all Seals and Crofts and America and all that,
Mhm.
all of that kind of stuff.
Mhm.
In my house, my mom controlled the record player.
Mhm.
And the song I remember the most is a song called "Let's Go Get Stoned" by Ray Charles
Let's go get
that
stoned.
Ashford and Simpson wrote, actually.
How about that?
And she used to play it over and over and over and over back in the day when it was automatic and it would play and then it would go back.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. Yes.
So that was what I remember from that. The other thing in my house musically was my dad. And there was always an organ. There was always a Wurlitzer electric piano. There was
Mhm.
always different keyboards around the house. And I had a drum set that I think I got when I was probably 4 or 5 years old.
Okay.
So I would play, and then my mom, if she'd put a record on, I'd play along with the record.
Mm.
And so that was kind of my musical environment. And then even as a kid, I would go watch my dad play,
Mhm.
on the weekends and stuff. He'd do like little gigs, or I'd try to tag along and go to his
Mhm.
rehearsals and
Cornbread
stuff.
Harris.
Cornbread Harris.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So that was kind of my musical atmosphere, my musical environment at the very beginning. The other thing I'll say is my mom exposed me to a lot of great culture because in Minnesota at that point in time, or Minneapolis at that time, there was the Guthrie Theater, which was a great, theater to go see plays.
Mhm.
There was the Children's Theater, so you could go see kids your age actually create and do things.
Yes.
Which was very inspiring to me.
Yes. Yes.
We had the Minnesota Orchestra, which
Mhm.
we'd go see that, and literally, and the Minneapolis Institute of Arts that I
Yeah.
literally just did. Alicia Keys and Swizz Beatz just did an art collection up there
Nice.
called Giants. That's beautiful, and I went back up there, and I hadn't been there since I was a kid.
Wow.
But it still exists, and it's a beautiful place to go see art. So anyway, even not in my home, even outside my home, my mom in particular made sure that I was exposed to the arts in a way
Mm.
that made me really fall in love with it.
Interesting. Now let me go back because
Mhm.
I would have always thought that your first instrument was the piano,
Mm.
and you said it was the drums.
Drums, yeah.
Interesting.
Drums. What happened was I remember we got, this is when color TVs first came out.
Mhm.
And I remember we got this, I think it was an RCA Victor big TV. It
I
wasn't
remember that too.
big, but it was,
Yeah.
but what I remember was there'd always be shows on, right? And I remember like James Brown back in the day was probably my favorite. But whenever James Brown was on, I would stand in front of the TV, blocking the screen,
Mhm.
but I'd beat on the top of the TV. And I know it must have drove my parents crazy. And finally, I think they just said, you know what, let's just get him a drum set
Wow.
so he can do that. And yeah, I mean, that's my earliest memory. So I rhythmically was that.
Interesting.
Yeah. And the thing that changed it was meeting Terry. He was the one
Right.
that changed me to a keyboard player.
Well, it's funny because that was my next question. You met
Yeah.
Terry while you were in high school in Minneapolis at a trio Upward Bound program.
Yeah. Actually, junior high.
Yeah. Okay. On the University of Minnesota campus.
So as we were checking into the dorms, Terry was sitting on his bed in his room, had a red, black, and green bass.
Red, black, and green.
And
bass.
he was playing,
Sounds like
because it
Terry.
was Nation Time.
Yeah.
That
sounds like Terry.
Oh yeah, and he's sitting there playing, and I didn't say anything, but he's playing Cool in the Gang. He's playing, I think, Let the Music Take Your Mind, maybe. So he's boom, 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 like he's playing, and I'm looking at this dude, and it was love at first sight.
I was about to say, I was gonna ask you what made you guys click?
Oh, it was when I saw him, it was love at first sight because it was I was an only child. I had older half brothers and sisters,
Okay.
but it was basically just me by myself.
Right.
Yeah, so he felt like instantly like the big brother I never had, or
So
the because he was a
cool.
couple years older than me. But
Yeah.
it just felt like just who's this cool dude? I got to get to know him, right?
Yeah.
And then he had the same experience, I think, with me because I would go down and play the piano. Like in the lunchrooms, they had stored a bunch of pianos and stuff.
Mhm.
And so I found my way down there and I'm playing. And Terry tells the story that allegedly there was a bunch of girls around me, and and I'm playing the piano and stuff.
That
right?
always brings out
And-
inspiration.
oh man, yeah, that's what it's all about, man. I'm telling you, that's
Right.
what it's all about.
Right.
And so anyway, when he saw me, it was the same thing. He was like, "Oh, I got to get to know this brother."
That's so dope.
Well, the first thing that happened though was because I'd grown up, as I mentioned earlier, with pop music, right?
Mhm.
So I was saving my money to go get the new Chicago album, which was Chicago 6.
Mm.
This is 1973.
Okay.
And
I was 1 year old.
I love that. I love that.
Very
Yeah,
cool.
man.
Okay.
And so anyway, I went to the store to get it and I came back. I was all excited. He said, "What'd you get?" I said, "I got the new Chicago album." He said, "Chicago?" I said, "Yeah, yeah." He said, what about Earth, Wind, and Fire? What about, what about Tower of Power? What about New Birth? What about, right?
Mhm.
And I'm going, I've never heard of those bands.
Wow.
He said, "What?" And of course, the first thing he puts on is New Birth. I Can Understand It.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm listening to this going, oh my God. Then he puts on Tower of Power, Soul Vaccination,
Mm-hmm.
and Earth, Wind, and Fire. It might have been Keep Your Head to the Sky maybe at that point, or maybe Where Have All the Flowers Gone? Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm like going, oh my God. So that's where we met. Because musically, because I knew all the pop stuff, he knew all the black stuff.
Right.
And then we just were like, it was an exchange of like ideas. Because
That's
I turned
funky.
him on to, and there was a couple things we landed right in the center of, like, because, what was it, Funk 49.
Okay.
If you remember that song? He loved that song.
Yeah.
So we fell in love with those things together. And of course, we already knew James Brown. We knew Marvin Gaye.
Sure.
We knew Stevie Wonder. We
Sure.
knew,
Yeah.
James Brown, all that. We knew all those kinds of things. And
Yeah.
Kool and the Gang, of course. So we were united though through music in that way.
Just that exchange is how I, from an outsider looking in, viewed Minneapolis.
Mm-hmm.
There was a scene there,
Mm-hmm.
without a doubt.
Oh yeah.
And it was a scene that might not have gotten as much of a mainstream look as maybe the Philly sound or the Motown sound or anything like that. But you guys had your own thing going on up there.
Mhm.
And I think a lot of it, especially when I think of you guys and the other gentlemen and people that we're going to mention later, is that I never seen an environment where you had black and white people
Mm-hmm.
listening to music. Like where I come from in Philly, it's the Philly sound. So all I
Yeah.
saw were Negroes. You know what I'm saying?
Yes,
Like,
yes.
that's all I saw.
Yeah,
Like the block parties to the events that we went to was
Mhm.
just black people.
Mhm.
Movies like Purple Rain, for example, showed a side of black culture that I never saw before. Like, wow, there were actually white people hanging out with the blacks. You know what I'm saying? Like it was,
Yeah.
and even when we came to Minneapolis and we hung out and all that other stuff and we went out to places,
Mm-hmm.
it was such a mixture.
Yes.
And that, I think, is the charm that created what Minneapolis is most known for. You guys, first off, it's some of the funkiest music I've ever heard in my life,
Mhm.
but it still had a edge to it that brought somewhat of a pop feel to it.
Mhm.
Like it was black,
Mm-hmm.
but you could ingest it. Everyone can ingest it. And that was
Yeah.
I think that's the charm of Minneapolis. Like you guys were more multicultural
Yes.
than maybe Philadelphia or Detroit or anything like that, where it was just isolated to one group of people.
Yeah. Well, see, the thing is, think about the makeup of Minneapolis was probably about 3% black when Terry and I were growing up.
Mm.
Well, you had to interact
Yes.
with white people. You just
Yes.
did because that's what was there.
Right.
But it was also what they call, Minnesota nice, right? People there were very polite and very nice. And when they asked how you were, they really meant it. It wasn't just like a line. They really wanted to know who you were.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it's interesting going forward from that. where, just to fast forward for a second, when the George Floyd murder happened,
Yes.
and everybody said, but wait, Minneapolis is so progressive and so whatever. But Minnesota is, I think, is very polite. And so that meant
Mm.
as we were growing up, we knew there were areas we shouldn't go as black
Right.
people,
Right.
and we just didn't go there.
Right.
We knew there was a south side, there was a north side, and there was a northeast side. You didn't go to the northeast side.
Mm.
I think they opened a White Castle over there or something. That might be about as far as you would go.
Right, right.
You'd maybe get
right.
you a White
Yeah,
Castle,
yeah,
and
yeah.
that's it.
Right.
But you just kind of knew there was kind of like the unspoken rules.
Yeah.
And unlike the South, where if there was somewhere you weren't supposed to be,
Yeah.
there'd be a sign that would just say,
Don't be there.
don't be
Basically.
there.
Yeah. Right. Right.
Whites only, or whatever those things were.
Yes.
There wasn't that in Minnesota or Minneapolis because it was just polite. So the fact that the racism and the prejudice that existed was kind of glazed over a little bit. We were aware of it, but also we were aware that we needed to act in a way that was not confrontational, that was like I was aware when I walked into a store
Yeah.
that I was being looked at as a black man,
Yes.
which means I was looked at as a threat.
Mm-hmm.
So I probably went out of my way to be very polite,
Yes.
very, well-mannered,
Yes.
well-spoken, all of those things.
Yes.
I didn't look at it at the time as as a bad thing.
No.
Because my mom was very much my mom grew up in Fergus Falls, Minnesota, which was one of the first places where there was black families in Minnesota, in the state.
Yeah.
And so she was very much on the way you look when you go out, be respectful
You
to
sound
people.
just like my mother.
Okay.
Just like my mother.
Yeah.
My
But I
mother
mean,
did the
that's
same
the
thing.
way I was brought up. So, and the music community, though, was very tight-knit. And there was a community center on the north side called The Way.
Okay.
And that community center, literally in the basement of The Way, like, of course, all community centers have, basketball and all
Sure.
that kind of stuff. But The Way also had a basement that was musical instruments. So you'd see Prince's band rehearse there.
Mm.
You'd see there was a band called The Family that would rehearse there. Not the Prince family.
Right.
of
Oh, okay. Okay. Got
Screams
it.
of
Got it.
Passion
Okay.
family,
Got you.
but before that, there was a group called that. There was a group called Back to Black
Okay.
that was great. Flight Time
Yes. You guys,
rehearsed
yeah.
there.
Mhm.
I had a band called Mind and Matter. There was a very Philly style singing group.
Okay.
Because Philly was my biggest influence
Right.
musically.
Gamble and Huff.
Yeah, Gamble and Huff.
Mhm.
Tom Bell.
Yep.
Blue Magic was my group.
Yes.
I loved all that
Yes.
all those records. But anyway, that was like my thing. So anyway, we would all get together. So we'd see everybody's practice.
Mm.
And then they do Battle of the Bands and stuff.
Mhm.
Like whenever there was a white event, I call it a white event. It was called it was called the Aquatennial.
We get it.
It was called the Aquatennial, and it was downtown. It was this beautiful parade. And I remember my mom used to take me when I was really young. We used to go see all the floats and stuff. It was a great parade. But it got to the point where it became sort of once again, this kind of polite signal. We really don't want the blacks to come downtown for this event.
Mm.
So what would happen is there's a gentleman named Spike Moss. And Spike Moss was like the community activist.
Mm-hmm.
And he started throwing on the same night as the parade,
Yeah.
he started throwing these huge concerts, outdoor Battle of the Band concerts.
Yes.
So you'd have Prince's band and my band and Terry's band, because we were in separate bands at that point,
Right.
and whatever, and everybody would go battle the band, and then he'd bring in a national act. I remember he had the Daz Band one year, and
Cool.
he'd bring in like
Of
people like
course.
that,
Sure.
and it would basically keep everybody politely separate
Mm-hmm.
from each other,
Mm-hmm.
and we didn't go where we weren't wanted, but we had a
Mm.
great environment to listen to music, to be with each other,
Yeah.
So it was an interesting way to grow up, but it also was the thing that led, I think, to a lot of our success, right? There's a saying, we just want a seat at the table.
Yeah.
Well, we didn't have a table, so we had to build a table. We had to build our own table.
Yeah. Yeah.
And what that involved was, when I had my band Mind and Matter, I remember we couldn't play in any of the white clubs, right? And there
Yeah.
was predominantly white clubs, but they all had R&B. They had white bands playing R&B music,
Yeah.
right? So, so they wouldn't hire us to play. And so I remember there was a hotel called the Dykeman that was getting ready to be torn down. It was basically condemned,
Mhm.
but they had a big ballroom. And we said, hey, let's rent the ballroom in the Dykeman. See, and so we went down and met with them. We said, can we rent the ballroom for a night and just, we want to throw like a thing.
Yeah.
And they said, well, what are you going to pay? And we said, well, we don't really have any money to pay, but here's what we figure. We're going to charge like $3 at the door.
Mhm.
We'll take the door. That's our money. But you guys got a whole bar of liquor,
Right.
and you charge people for your drinks and whatever, and you
Right.
take the bar. But if we bring the people down, so that became the partnership.
Wow.
And literally, so before social media, we had to like print up flyers.
Yep.
And
That
we
was
put
the
'em-
social media back then.
That was the
kids.
social media. You print up a flyer.
Yeah.
We stuck it on the windows at all the clubs that they wouldn't let us play at.
Yeah.
And we just said, come down, see us, mind and matter, whatever. And there was a black station. There was a sun up to sundown AM station at the top of the dial that you could,
Uh-huh.
if you pointed your car in the wrong direction, you wouldn't get a
Right.
signal.
Right.
But one of the guys there, Pharaoh Black was his name. He said, I'll promote the event on the radio, whatever. Anyway, the night of the show, I think we probably had 1,000, 1,500 people, something like that, show up.
Mm.
And the
Damn.
clubs were sitting empty. And they were all like, so the club
Man.
owners were all going, wait, where's everybody at? And they say, oh, they're all going watching the band that you won't hire.
They basically created Sugar Rays out this
Exactly. Hell yeah. Hell yeah. And it was great. And of course, after that happened, then of course the clubs all came to us.
Yes,
like, oh, you
of
guys
course.
should come and play. And we
Of
were like,
course.
no, we're good. We're good.
Right.
But what it taught us was it wasn't enough to just have the talent. If you couldn't somehow have a way to get the talent out there.
Yeah.
And so we had to become entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
Well, once we did that, and then around that same time is when Prince got his deal with Warner Brothers.
Mm.
And we knew it wasn't about sitting in the Twin Cities and being comfortable.
Right.
It was about, let's figure out how to get out of here in a national. So the adversity made us look toward a national thing,
Yeah. But what was cool about you guys and Prince and the whole lot was, even though your songs went out internationally, you guys stayed in the city.
Oh, yeah.
Which made it cool. Like again, you guys brought so much vibe to Minneapolis. Like, because again, not knowing what it was about, you guys were the ambassadors of it, of the city itself and its music.
We loved living up there, and a lot of it was, I guess I call it ignorance. Well, they say ignorance is bliss.
Mm.
I think we didn't know what everybody else was doing.
Mhm.
We weren't. It wasn't an East Coast thing where, I know New York was very territorial with the music that, the way the music sounded and what was happening there. I'm sure Philly, Detroit, all these different places, and LA had a whole different scene going on.
Yeah.
We got it all,
Right.
right? We heard everything.
Yeah.
And so when we created music, some of it was based on not knowing what we weren't supposed to do.
Mm.
Like if we made a funky song, like in the time, if we made a song like Get It Up, and it's like, okay, that's funky. But then in the middle of it, we put a loud ass guitar solo,
Right.
a rock guitar solo.
Right.
We didn't know you're not supposed to do that.
Yeah.
We were like, okay, yeah, that's cool,
Yeah. Yeah.
So I just think a lot of it was a little bit of ignorance. And even I remember when we started, even putting our studio together and buying our equipment and stuff.
Yeah.
And I remember we would look at the equipment, at some of the studios, and it would be like super expensive. And we were just like, we can't afford that.
Right.
So instead of having like back in the day, the Studer tape machines
Yeah.
were like the Rolls Royce of tape machines.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? Every studio had one.
Absolutely.
We had an Otari machine because it was
Mm.
a fifth of the cost.
Right.
And it sounded fine to
Yeah.
us. We didn't know. Same thing with our, our
Talent makes a way, though.
soundboards. Yeah.
So,
Yeah. I mean, we just didn't know. And then the other thing was, even with synthesizers, I remember everybody had Moog synthesizers back in that
Mhm.
day. ARP synthesizers were really big, and all that. We had Oberheims. We didn't know, people were like, Oberheim.
Oberheim's dope though.
That was the thing. For us, that was the sound. When you think
Yeah.
about the Minneapolis sound, and I
Yeah.
always say it, the roots of the Minneapolis sound is Prince.
Mm.
But Prince was Oberheim. First Oberheim synthesizer I ever saw in my life. I actually auditioned for Prince's band.
Wow.
He did an audition for his band,
Yeah.
and I remember I walked in and he sat me in front of this big synthesizer. It was an Oberheim 4 voice.
Yeah.
I had no clue. I was like, I don't even know what to do here. But I learned the songs, right? And we went through the songs and stuff, and it was cool. I
Yeah.
knew I wasn't going to get the job,
Right.
but it was a great experience to learn that and to
Mhm.
see that synthesizer for the first time and
Yeah.
go, "Oh wow,
Yeah.
okay, that's where we need to try to get to."
Right.
You know?
Your story is very similar to my groups, and especially me in general. Like, I think part of what made your sound what it was just like you said, you do something funky and then you put like some guitar solo in the middle of it. I think it's a testament of you running into Terry or running to Terry and saying you got a Chicago record.
Mhm.
Your palette was broad. It wasn't just R&B music. You listened to, just like you said, America and Crosby, Stills and Nash and,
Yes.
all those other things. And
Yeah.
I was the same way. Like a lot of my music, yes, I was drilled with the OJs and Harold Melvin and the Blue Notes and
Mhm.
Billy Preston. You know what I mean? Like all of
Yes.
those things I listened to
Yeah.
because it was around my house, it was around my neighborhood, and I loved
Mhm.
it.
Yeah.
And when I was a kid, the birth of hip hop was going on. So I listened to that
Yes.
too, and
Yes.
MC Shan and Marley Marl and Juice Crew and all that. So I listened to
Mhm.
all that stuff, but I like the Carpenters
Right. Yeah, me too.
and I like the Alan Parsons Project. And
Yes. Yes, sir.
I listened to all of those things. And what's funny is there's a weird misconception about Boys to Men, my group, because we, I guess if there was a Minnesota nice, I guess our parents taught us Philadelphia nice
Mhm.
in a sense where our parents were very much stickler on being polite, making sure you clean and all those other things. That's
Yes,
why
sir.
when you
Yep.
said the same things that you said that your mother told you, that sound
Mhm.
like my mom, like
Mhm.
almost verbatim.
Oh, yeah.
And so our worlds were a little different. It wasn't maybe as hood as maybe other black folks could relate to.
Mhm.
And even when I was a kid, at 8 years old, I sang for a choir called the Philadelphia Boys Choir,
Mhm.
where it was 95% black, I mean white.
Mhm.
And I was like one of the two, maybe three black kids that was in the whole choir.
Right.
So I'm 8 years old, flying to England,
Mhm.
singing Ave Maria
Right. Yes.
and Coronation Te Deum and all this other stuff.
Yes.
And so my mind was a little, I guess, broader because I saw things that a normal 8, 9 year old child, black kid, would normally see.
That's why exposure is so important.
Yeah.
You have to be exposed to things. Like, I guess, people always say, if you see it, you can be it.
Yes.
And I just think that's kind of what it is. I mean,
Yes.
I saw orchestras, I saw choirs.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
I remember as a little boy, I played bongos with my mom. She was in a group called the Mother Singers at school when I was like, I was probably 5 years old or something.
Nice.
And I played the bongos. We did, what did we do? I think we did Harry Belafonte or something. And
Yeah.
it's like
Yeah.
all of those things were so much the seeds of what it was.
Yes.
But I was always very comfortable. I think because of that, I was always very comfortable across, no matter who was in the room.
Yeah.
As white people, as black people, didn't
Right.
matter to me.
Right.
I was always very comfortable. But the other thing I always think about is the education that we got, and Terry calls it seasoning. And it's the seasoning where, nowadays, if you can sit in your bedroom on your laptop and make a record.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with that.
Nothing.
But then they go, okay, now go perform.
Mm.
Well, we came from the school of performance.
Right.
We were in bands.
Right.
So not only did we have to learn to perform to entertain people, but we also had to, depending on if we were playing at a bar mitzvah,
Right.
at a
Yeah,
roller
you had
rink,
to switch it
at a
up.
prom.
Right.
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 And people would come up and request songs.
Yeah.
And it wasn't like, oh, just go to Spotify or whatever and
Yes.
right. And here's the lyrics and all
Yes.
that. You had to figure it out.
Yes.
And so it was about learning to basically please people and entertain people.
Yeah.
But by learning those songs, because you had to play the hits on the radio.
That's right.
And of course, we were very anal about it. We wanted to get all the sounds exactly correct and all that and figure it
Mhm.
out. So being like that, almost like scientists, that was the way we would figure it out. But that then turned into the way we produced, because that
Yeah.
was like
Your
our
DNA. I was about to say that. It
yeah,
became, yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
And the other
Right.
thing for me, even in the bonus of that, was I stopped doing writing music and stuff for a while, and I was DJing.
Yes.
So, but I wasn't just DJing at one club. I
Yeah.
had a teen club 2 nights of the week.
Yes.
I had a sophisticated black club
Yes.
couple nights a week.
Yes.
I had a sophisticated white club 1 night of the week.
Yeah.
I had a gay club 1 night of the week.
Yes. Yeah.
And I would go to these different clubs, play different music. Some of the clubs I'd talk, I'd be like, party over here. Like I'd be, like I'd get people going, right?
Right.
In the gay club, they said, just play the records, no talking. It's like, okay, cool. So it was just mixing,
Right.
right?
Right.
So I learned all of those things. And then when we
Wow.
started doing, when we got in later on, started doing remixes and stuff, and DJs would always go, man, I love y'all's remixes, man. You always give us a nice intro and a little break in the middle and all
Yeah.
that. And it's like, yeah, because I used to DJ.
Right.
So I know in a DJ, I'm going, looking at the record going, why
Wow.
didn't they do this?
Wow. Wow.
So it was such a great, we had seasoning. We had such a great musical
Yes.
education. And then the time was easy. After playing 4-hour, hour sets or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
to go play 20 minutes of your own music
Yeah.
or 30 minutes or 45
Right.
minutes, I
Yeah.
think we
Light
got up to
work.
it. It was so easy.
Yeah. Yeah.
This was
yeah.
this was simple. And we'd rehearse 6 hours a day.
Yeah.
And Prince was great because Prince would rehearse us for 6 hours.
Yeah.
Then he'd go rehearse the Revolution for 6 hours.
He was insane.
Then he'd
I
go to
heard
the
some
studio
crazy stories.
all night.
Yeah.
And
Well-
then he'd walk back in with a cassette and he'd stick it in and he'd go, I did this last night. And it would be like Lady Cab Driver or something.
What?
Yeah, like you just like, it was nuts.
Listen, you know what? Let's go back. Let's
Okay,
go back.
okay,
There's a
all right,
lot. So
all right.
let's go back. You went to high school with Prince, right?
Yeah, we met in junior high school.
Okay.
We took a piano class together.
Okay.
We both already knew how to play.
Right.
But the teacher would give us, Mary Had a Little Lamb or something,
Right.
and go learn this music.
Yeah.
And then she'd leave. Well, when she left, they had these little electronic keyboards and stuff.
Uh-huh.
And we just start wailing away.
Right.
And I thought I could play pretty good because I kind of copied the way my dad played, kind of a jazz, kind of a blues style. My dad
Yes.
was a blues player.
Yeah.
But Prince's dad was a jazz player. And
Mm.
so Prince would get in there on the keyboards and do stuff, and I'd just be like fascinated, like, dude, how's he thinking of this stuff, right?
Wow.
And it was great. But anyway, we hit it off musically.
Yeah.
We never were like friends or anything like that,
Right.
but we hit it off musically. And I remember at the end of that school year, they were going to do a musical.
Yeah.
So they said, who wants to be in the band? And so we both raised our hands, and they said, okay, Prince, what do you want to play? And he said, guitar. And I looked at him like, guitar? Really?
Wow.
And so then they said, Jimmy, what do you want to play? And I said, drums. And Prince looked at me like, drums? So we get into rehearsal. First thing Prince does, he walks in with his guitar. He plugs it in. Chicago, Make Me Smile. Terry Kath, the guitar player in Chicago.
Yeah.
Just an amazing solo, right? He, note for note, hits this solo.
No way.
Right? Just note for note, the sound, everything. And I'm like looking at him going, wow. Right?
Wow.
So anyway, we get into rehearsal, we do our thing, things sounding pretty good, take a break, go to the bathroom. I hear somebody on the drums. I think it's the drum teacher, right? I come back, it's Prince on the drums.
Holy shit.
Killing the drums. And then he hands me the sticks back and I'm like,
Right.
Dude.
I'm good. Wow.
I'm good.
That's crazy.
Because they asked me, they said, did you know when he was young that he
Yeah.
was that? And I said, yes, I knew. Because I'd never seen anything like it before.
Yeah.
The other piece of Prince from back in the junior high school days, it was interesting, was he was a really good basketball player. I'm
So
trying
the
to
stories are true, ladies
Oh,
and
it is
gentlemen.
absolutely true.
Prince could hoop.
He could hoop. He could hoop.
That's crazy.
And he was super competitive too.
Yeah.
But I remember, and the girls loved him. I remember he'd
I
come
remember
up
you
the
telling
court,
me this in the
and his
studio.
afro would be like
yes,
all choreographed, looking at me, and the girls would be, Prince. Oh man,
No, it's
But-
funny because I remember you telling us in the studio. We were in flight time.
yeah,
He told me, man, went to school with this guy, and he could play, he could sing. He had this big afro because back in the day, I guess the afros was like a lion's mane. Like
Yes.
the bigger your afro, the more chicks you would get or whatever.
absolutely.
And his would flop and the whole thing. And
Oh,
he,
yeah.
And he could play basketball. I was like, I remembered like the fun tension.
Yes.
between you guys because of the fact that, I mean, Jimmy, you were a force of your own too. You were a child prodigy playing piano and all of that other stuff. So, I mean, to have those two, an unstoppable force meeting a movable object, like you're gonna have some of those kind of rubs and all of that. Now, how did you guys get into his actual band? Because it was first Flight Time,
Yeah.
and then
Right. So Flight
yeah,
Time. Okay. So the first piece of the puzzle that happened was, so Terry had Flight Time.
yes,
And at this point, I had started DJing.
okay,
Terry had been trying to get me to join his band. And I had played on all of whenever they do their demos and stuff,
yeah,
Terry would always call me in to come play keyboards for him.
okay,
So and Terry and I we were best friends at that point, but
Yeah.
but we just weren't in the same bands.
yeah,
And he kept going, man, you got to come on, man, you got to get in, come down and play with us, come down and play with us. And I was like, nah. So anyway, at one point in time, I remember he said, I need a keyboard player, and he already had Monty Moyer, right, the
Okay.
other keyboard player in the time.
okay, yes,
And Monty was great.
yeah,
Matter of fact, I'll tell you how I discovered Monty was one of the clubs I was playing at was called The Taste.
taste, okay.
And it was downtown Minneapolis. Second floor and the third floor was kind of a chill club. Second floor was like, dance floor, whole thing. I DJ'd on the second floor.
right,
First floor was live music.
yeah,
Terry's band was playing on the first floor. I was DJing on the second floor.
nice,
Terry said, man, I found a keyboard player. You got to come down and hear him. I said, okay, cool. So I come down and I'm hearing What You Won't Do for Love, Bobby Caldwell, right?
okay,
And I'm like, what you won't do for love. And I'm like, who's singing?
right,
And I look behind this keyboard, this little white man behind the keyboard, killing this vocal, right? Killing it. And I was like, who's this dude? So anyway, I went back upstairs after the gig was over. I come down at the end of the night. And I said, man, that dude's good. Terry, where'd you find him? He said, oh, whatever. I can't remember what he said. But anyway, I was like, okay, good. We got your keyboard player. He said, no, man, we still need a second keyboard player. I said, no. Anyway, I was going out with this girl, older woman.
hmm
I think I was 18. She was 30, I think.
Look at this fly guy,
we
man.
I don't break up with the girl. The girl breaks up with me, basically.
Uh-huh.
I'm walking home from her apartment, and I hear some music coming out of a club. And I looked in it. It was called the YASM. It was the
The Yasm.
Young African American Society of Men or Music, probably.
Okay,
Right? And I walk in, and it's Terry and his band.
okay,
And he goes, Jam, what's up? I said, what's up, T? He said, man, you coming to join the band? I said, no, man. I said, I'm just coming home from this girl's house. But I said, what are you guys doing? He said, well, there's Weaver, who was the guy that owned the place.
okay,
He said he lets us practice here during the week, and then we play on the weekends.
yeah,
We said, oh, cool. So every day Terry would call me. Now, this is back before the cell phone days,
Wow,
right? So
right,
this is
right.
like the phone in the house, ring,
yes,
hello.
yes, with the
You
tangle
gonna-
cord.
Yeah, right? You going to come join the band? I said, Terry, no, man. I said, I just broke up with this girl, man, whatever. He said, get your mind off it. Get your mind off it. I said, no. Next day he called. What you going to do, Jam? I said, no, man. I said, Terry, I don't even have any keyboards anymore, man. I sold all my keyboards and I got DJ equipment, man.
Yeah.
What kind of keyboard you need, man? We'll get you keyboards.
Oh,
I was
that's
like,
dope.
Terry was relentless.
God bless you, Terry.
So finally, I joined the group, and I remember the first gig we played was we opened for, I think, Cameo and not Cameo and the Barcades. It was Cameo and Shalimar.
That was your
maybe?
first
No, it was
gig?
Cameo. It was Cameo.
That was your first gig?
Yeah, and we opened for them.
Wow.
And I remember what I always remember from this gig was, and Alexander O'Neill, by the way, was our lead singer
Okay.
in the group.
Yes.
He was the lead singer of
okay.
Flight Time.
Okay.
And I remember after the gig, we were taking our equipment down and stuff because we didn't have roadies or nothing. We just, doing our thing. And I remember the tour manager or whoever it was, the head roadie or whatever for Cameo, he looked at us and he said, y'all ain't never going to be nothing. And we were like, huh? He says, y'all ain't never going to be nothing. We were like, wow.
Wait, who said this?
This was the Cameos, like, I don't know whether he was the road manager. He wasn't the road manager because he was actually taking equipment down, but maybe they're like their head roadie guys. Like
the roadie
yeah. He told us
had an opinion?
he had an opinion. He said, y'all will never never go nowhere.
Nigga, you the
never do that,
roadie.
right? Yeah.
You're the roadie.
So here's what's interesting. Our first really big city that loved us was Detroit.
Okay.
And it was because they loved Prince so much.
Okay.
And there was a DJ, the Electrifying Mojo. And I remember when Get It Up came out, he played it like 12 times in a row.
Mm.
And he said, "Who is this? Who do you think this is?" Right? And people were calling the station. It sounds like Prince a little bit, but something, you know. And he would go, "No, it's not Prince. It's not Prince." So anyway, we went to visit him at the station. They
Mhm.
put us on it. They put us on a show, and our album wasn't even out yet. Oh,
Yeah.
just the single.
Yeah.
They put us on a show, and the headliner of the show was Cameo,
Damn.
and the support act was Shalimar. Right.
How about that?
So I'll never forget the feeling of this. We hit the stage at I think it was at the Masonic Temple Theater, which was
Okay.
maybe probably 4,000, 5,000 people, right?
Mm-hmm.
I remember the way we did our show because we never got a sound check, right? We knew we'd never get a sound check.
Mm.
So we'd always start with a song called The Stick.
Okay.
And that would
Get
be
the
so
sound
that
together. Get
yeah,
everything
get the
together.
drums together
Mhm.
because
Get
it started
everything
off with just drums.
Yep.
Boom, ka, boom, boom,
Yeah.
ka, boom. And that just happened, right?
Yeah.
But then what would happen is Morris would stand with his back towards the audience.
Mm-hmm.
And then when that first hit happened, it would be the spotlight of Morris with his back turned toward the
That's
audience,
so pimp.
combing his hair.
That's so pimp. That's so pimp. That's so pimp.
And I remember we hit our first note, and I thought the Beatles had come in.
Come on.
It was like, ah.
The persona was already there.
I was like,
it was-
oh my God.
Yeah.
We launched into our stuff, man, and
Yeah.
it was like, I swear to God, it was like the Beatles. It was like,
that
wow.
swag, man.
And of course, we ended with and they didn't know any of the songs. That's the funny thing. But then we ended with Get It Up.
Didn't
and
matter.
everybody was, partying and stuff. But we just wiped the stage, right?
Yeah.
Shalimar came out, and Shalimar was at a point where, Howard was still there, but they had replaced the other two, I think.
Okay.
So that wasn't quite up to par, right?
Shalimar wasn't all the way Shalimar.
Wasn't all the way Shalimar. And then Cameo, by the time Cameo came out, I remember probably about half the people had left. Because literally most of the people at that show, we found out later,
There you go.
they
That's-
came to see the time.
and that's how it's done.
That was the draw.
Yeah.
And Cameo had a kind of a off night. I remember they weren't quite hitting like when we had seen them at their best.
Mm-hmm.
They weren't quite hitting like that. And I remember we went down afterwards and we were going to try to say hello or, something.
Mm-hmm.
Saw that same dude.
I was about to ask you, did you see the roadie?
Saw
Did you
the
see
roadie.
the roadie?
We saw the roadie. And the roadie just looked at us and we just went, we just nodded at him. Didn't say nothing. We didn't have to say anything.
You didn't have to say shit.
Enough has been said.
Yes. Oh
Yeah.
my gosh, that is
Yeah.
so satisfying.
Yeah. No, that was a great moment.
Yeah.
And Prince loved it too because we had done like a little Chitlin circuit tour.
Yeah.
And we had been killing it down in the South and all these different places. And Prince came to a show we did in I think it was in Michigan.
Mhm.
And we weren't very good.
Okay.
And Prince was like, "Oh, so you're killing it on the road, huh?" And we were like, "Shit."
Prince.
We just had an off night. So we were like, we're not going to let that happen again.
Yeah. Yeah. I
And-
mean, that's the growing pains, man. Like,
Yeah.
I could tell you how many shows we sucked at. Like,
Yeah.
oh, how about this? How about this for a story?
Yep.
First show was in Minneapolis. Jimmy and Terry was there.
Mm-hmm.
That show was trash. It was awful. It was at the Target Center, I believe.
Yes, Target
It's
Center.
15,000 people.
Yep.
The production was going wrong. That's why I'd never tell my family to never come to the first show. Don't come, because I know there's gonna be some whack shit going on,
Yep.
and you're gonna think it's the worst show ever. And that happened. These guys were there, right?
Yeah.
We were mortified because we knew they were there. Like there was platforms off the stage. Mike almost fell off the stage 12 feet, the whole shit. It was just bad. Like the sound was bad. It was just bad. We're all sitting backstage with them, Jimmy and Terry, and it was quiet. And we're all just kind of sitting there. and I don't know how y'all felt, but I looked over and y'all two were just looking like y'all were trying to find something to say. And but the fact that y'all was sitting there, y'all was so supportive, just sitting there, like it was dead quiet.
Yeah.
And me and the guys just kind of like, fuck, man. Like it was like, but then after that, we was like, yo, we got into the crew's ass. Like we was like, yo, that can never happen again. It was actually one of our most successful like tours. But
Yeah, absolutely.
the point was, the moral of the story is, future entertainers, is that you're going to have those moments. You're going to have bad shows. I still have bad shows, like 33 years in it, and it's still, have shows that where I'm like, yo, what the fuck was I doing? You know what I'm saying? Like, just sound ain't right, your voice ain't right. You're just not right sometimes, and that's going to happen. But that's not the end of the world, for real. Like, just wipe it off. I mean, you see what happened to these gentlemen. You know what I'm saying? And even with us, it happens. It's part of the journey.
Yeah, there's two things I think of with that. Is one is when Janet did her first night of the Rhythm Nation tour.
Mm-hmm.
I went down to Florida. She did it in Miami, I think was her first stop. And it was really a disastrous show. Although but what I remember was the crowd, like all the things I knew weren't going right,
Mm-hmm.
the crowd had no clue.
Yeah, yeah,
And they were so excited to see her.
yeah.
And it was really rough. And I remember afterwards I said, the good news is you're never going to have a show like that again.
That's right.
And
I want
remember
to
the
say y'all
next,
said something like that to us too.
yeah. And the next show I think she did in North Carolina or somewhere.
Yeah.
And it was perfect. She killed it. It was perfect. And then I think she did an MTV show in New York or something after. But she had it, but she got it out of her system right away. The other thing that I know is a lot of times some of the shows that have felt the worst on stage
Yes.
have been the best in the crowd. Because what you're
Agreed.
experiencing on
100%.
stage, you have your monitors, you have your in-ears nowadays or whatever.
Mhm.
And you can be hearing stuff, it sounds off, it doesn't
Yes.
sound right. We did a gig, Terry and I did a gig for the Pittsburgh Jazz Festival a couple of years ago.
Mhm.
We just wanted to test out playing our own catalog of songs, right?
Yeah.
And we had Sherelle came, SOS Band came, we had some few people come out. It was fun. But I'm telling you, we couldn't see the way the stage was set up. We couldn't see past the first, like probably 3 or 4 rows.
Mhm.
And the people in the first 3 or 4 rows were all sitting there. They might as well have been cardboard cutouts.
Yeah.
And I'm like going,
Those jazz festivals.
damn,
man.
this ain't working. Like
Yeah.
our thing ain't working. So we get off. When we come off stage, the promoter goes, oh my God, that's the best show I've ever seen. And I'm going, huh? Like, okay, cool.
Yeah.
Later on that night, I started seeing people post on social media and people were losing their minds.
Yeah.
We just weren't seeing it.
Yes.
We were just seeing that first 3 or 4 rows, but behind that,
Yeah.
people were partying
Crazy.
and it was crazy. Yeah, and so we had no clue. So you just
Yeah.
never know.
You just never know. And yeah, you're absolutely right. The perception from where we look from stage is totally different from what's going on out there, because we did a show in Jamaica a few months ago, and it was late. We were the headliners though, and they stuck around. God bless them. Shout out to Jamaica.
Yep.
We know you guys were tired. You were probably drunk, the whole 9 yards. It was a
Right.
long festival. It was a long day.
Yep.
And we're doing what we do. And we got off stage. And I remember Nate saying, man, they didn't like it. And they was just sitting there and standing or whatever. And we was driving off. When I say the crowd was,
Yes.
and we
Yeah.
were like,
Yeah.
it's so a lot of times that's a life lesson.
Yes.
What you see from your vantage point may not be what it is at all.
Yeah. No, that's absolutely true. Did you guys, because one of the things for us was we would always, back in the time days, on the tour bus, after every show, we'd watch our show back.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And there'd be shows.
We do that too.
Okay. So there'd be shows where we'd be on stage and we'd think we're killing this. This is the best show we've ever
Trash.
done. We'll get back. Yeah. We'll watch it on the bus. We'll be out of key.
Yeah.
Bass will be out of tune.
Right.
Some will be. And we're just like, oh man. And then we'll have shows that on stage we can't hear ourselves or whatever. We'll be like, it's the worst show ever. And we'll
Bomb.
get it. And it's the best show we've ever done.
It's weird.
It's weird.
It's weird.
But it is a good life lesson too, because even when you look at where you're at in your life,
Yeah.
and a lot of times, even if let's say you're having a down period of your life or
Yeah.
whatever, but other people are looking at you going, man,
It's true.
And I got to say, the greatest thing about, amongst all the great things about Terry Lewis, was Terry, or is Terry, he always saw me better than I saw myself.
Yes. Yes.
And you got to have people around you who see you in a way better. And
Terry
I will
has
say,
a gift for that.
he does have a gift for that.
He
And
has a gift for that.
he does. And
Yeah.
but he does it, but he doesn't bullshit you.
No.
Like he tells it like it
No,
is.
that's right.
That's why him and Prince got along so good. Because
Right.
Terry would always call Prince on bullshit.
Right.
Prince would say some and Terry would go, man, you know that's bullshit. Prince."
Right.
You know, and that. but you need to have people like that in your life. And Terry's that for me.
Yeah.
He calls me on stuff, but it's always out of love, and it's always because he sees me better. Like
Yeah.
he always is like, I mean, really from, like I said, him convinced me to join the band.
Yeah.
He was like, man, Jam, you're a rock star, man. Come on, you gotta,
Yeah.
it was just like,
He
come
saw
on, we gotta
something
do
in you
this.
that you didn't see.
Yeah, he did.
Yeah.
And I'll say about Prince, best thing about Prince was the story I always tell is 777-9311.
Mhm.
So we're rehearsing the song, right? And we get done, and Prince goes, Jimmy Jam, what are you doing with your left hand? So I'm not doing anything, Prince. I'm playing the little bass part with Terry and, whatever. He says, use both hands. Do Monty's part too. It's got to be bigger than the record. Like, okay, cool. So now I'm playing, right? Cool. We get done. He goes, Jimmy Jam, what note are you singing on the chorus? So I'm not singing on the chorus, Prince. I said it's a 3-part harmony. They're doing it. Find a note. It's got to be bigger than the record. So now I'm playing and I'm singing 777-9311. So I'm playing. All right, I'm good, right? We get done. He goes, Jimmy Jam, why aren't you doing the choreography? Choreography, Prince, I'm standing behind the keyboard. He goes, it's simple choreography. You should be able to do it. Like, okay. So now, and it is simple choreography, just the 4 quarters, right? So now I'm trying to hit the 4 corners. I'm trying to play my part. I'm trying to hit my note. I can't do it.
Right.
I can't do it. I'm so frustrated. And I'm just like, damn it. So rehearsal ends. Next day, we come back for rehearsal. Prince goes, 777. So now we start playing the song. I swear to God, about a minute into the song, not only am I playing my part, singing my note, and hitting the 4 corners.
Come on.
I'm tipping my hat.
Come on.
I'm taking my hanky out.
It's that pimp shit.
Right? And what I realized was that Prince saw me better than myself.
How
I'm looking
about
at
that?
myself in what I can't do that.
Yeah.
And he's going, not only can you do it, but you're going to kill it
Yeah.
when you do it. And
Yeah.
and I realize how important it is to have somebody like that around you, to just see you and then motivate you. It's like a good coach.
Bivens was that for us.
Uh-huh.
He was austere. He's very serious about it. And looking back, it made us better people. At first we were like, man, why you gotta be an asshole? You know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
But that was his way, 1. And then 2, it really just made us pinpoint what we needed to do to fix what was wrong.
Mhm.
And that was the best part of it. Like we owe a lot to that man because he helped us with our I guess our raw talent, and he gave us the discipline to know how to make it better even after he left.
Mhm.
So that stuck with us. And
Mhm.
even now after 33 years, like, it made a huge impact. And even with you guys, meeting you guys, like we've always had real conversations with you guys. Like for those of you guys who don't know, like before we would record anything in Minneapolis, we would first have a powwow session. We would sit
Mhm.
and talk for hours
Mhm.
about life, about relationships,
Right.
everything. And then within that circle of oscillating ideas and thoughts and stuff like that, songs would come about.
Right.
But I have a couple of questions.
Okay.
First, we have to know how Jimmy and Terry transformed, or rather evolved from being in a time to being Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis. Please tell us the snowstorm story, please.
Okay, the famous snowstorm story.
Yes.
So when the Time tour ended, the first tour we did with Prince, which was the Controversy tour,
Mhm.
Terry, that last day said, I'm going to LA, who's coming with me? And at that point in time, for people that remember this, everybody was saving their money for a VCR.
Oh, yeah.
It was all about the VCR.
It's called a video cassette recorder.
Yep.
Kids.
Yep.
It's how we used to
And-
watch
yeah.
movies and stuff.
Yep.
Yeah. Go ahead.
So everybody had saved their little per diem. Everybody was saving their little per diem money, right?
Mhm.
To get this, right? And so everybody's like, man, you're crazy, man. I'm getting a VCR. I'm getting a VCR. And I said, Terry, why are you going to LA? He said, because they need us out there. And I said, okay. I said, I'll go. He said, okay, cool. I said, where are we going to stay? He said, no, we'll figure it out. I said, where are we going to get equipment to do demos and stuff? He said, we'll figure it out. I was like, okay. And I just like kind of, I mean, going back to when, like I say, Terry was twisting my arm about joining the group and all that kind of stuff, and told me to play keyboards instead of drums. I just went along with what Terry said.
Wow.
I just was really the beneficiary of.
That's a cool partnership, man.
Yeah. I just was really like, okay, this brother knows what he's talking about. I think I trust him.
Yeah.
And, you know, we came to LA, we figured it out. We found some people that had a house that we knew from Minneapolis, and they had one little room in their house. And Terry and I put a couple cots in there, and that was our summer. Basically, was every day they'd get up and go to work or go to school, whatever. And Terry and I would we brought a little 4-track off of the, I can't remember what it was called, like basically like the classified ads in the paper, because there was no internet at this point. But we kind of found, you know, a little Porta Studio. So we got a little Porta Studio. We found a microphone. I have a little Casio keyboard. I still have it, about that big. Had a little drum machine in it. And that was the thing. And then we met, the thing that we lucked out on was we met Leon Silvers.
Oh, wow.
And Leon Silvers was, they had a basketball game, a celebrity basketball game. It was like the Silvers versus, I don't remember the station. Might have been K-Day.
Okay.
Or something.
Okay.
Back in the day. And we met because Terry played basketball. So he was like, yeah, let's play in this game. Right, cool. So I showed up, but I didn't really play. But that's where we met. So afterwards, Leon was like, hey, I'm going to go to the studio. You guys want to come down? We said, sure. We come to the studio. John McClane's at the studio.
John McClane.
A couple of other people. And we had like our little demo tape that we had made, right?
Yeah.
And we started playing songs off the demo tape. And John McClane was like, okay. And then, you know, and Leon was like, okay.
Yeah.
And he's like, when do you guys come back? Because he was always scratching his beard. When do you guys come back? We got to record those shits. He called them the shit. There was always the shits. It was a song, the shits. We're going to record those shits.
Yeah, right.
And it's like, okay, cool. And but we had, you know, Wild Girls went to Climax on that tape. We met Dina Andrews, who was working at Solar Records.
Yes.
And she said, you know, I'm going to help you guys get some meetings with some people and all that, right? So cool. So anyway, one of the meetings she gets us is with Clarence Avant.
Yeah.
And Clarence said, I want you guys to produce, because we had done High Hopes for SOS Band.
Okay.
That's what had happened. And he said, we had written it, but Leon produced it.
Right.
And he said, man, how would you produce a record differently? And we played him the demo of the record. And he said, I like this. He said, I want you guys to produce a couple songs on SOS Band. We said, cool. So in looking at the schedule now, because now we're back on tour with The Time on the 1999 tour.
Yeah.
We had 4 days off in New York. And everybody was like, you know, like, oh, 4 days off in New York. We're like, we can probably go down to Atlanta and do these SOS Band tracks before our next gig. Right. So we fly to Atlanta. We go in the studio. And first of all, I have to just say, the SOS Band, we're basically a couple kids at this point. You know, we're not veterans or anything like that. Never produced really anything in our lives besides, you know, like I say, the Climax record, a couple other things. But we really hadn't done anything. And they were very, like, trusting of us and very much, they actually listened to us, which was amazing to me.
Yeah.
But we ended up doing, you know, we did Just Be Good to Me. We did that. We came back and did a couple other ones. But anyway, as we're leaving now, we're booked on the first flight out. We're going to the airport. We're driving to the airport at like, I don't know, 6 in the morning or something. Yeah. Still dark outside. We're driving to the airport and I see like a snow starts, right? But I'm from Minneapolis. So it's not snow. It's what we would call a dusting of snow.
Okay.
Like you wouldn't even shovel it. You might get a broom and sweep it off the sidewalk, but you wouldn't even, it's not shovel.
Yeah.
And I swear, we get to the airport, we go to the gate, and now this is the Atlanta airport now.
Right.
Now, the Atlanta airport, for anybody, I don't know if you've ever been to the Atlanta airport, but it was one of the first airports back in that day, and this is 83. It was one of the first airports that had like different terminals, but you had to take a train to get from terminal to terminal.
That's right.
Oh my God. They said your flight's canceled. We said, why? The airport's closed. What, for snow? We're like looking out there going, that's nothing. But they weren't equipped for it.
Right.
So we're literally now going, okay, we just got to get out of here. Maybe we'll just book a flight to any flight. We'll book ourselves on every plane.
Right.
And whatever the first flight out of here is, we'll connect to wherever that's going.
Right.
Then we thought, no, you know what we should do? We should get the rent-a-car back and we should drive to like another airport, but there was no, once again, you don't have like a weather report on your phone because
Right.
there was no
Yeah. Yeah. There
phone.
was no phones.
There was no GPS to know how far anything was, or there was just no way of knowing.
Yeah.
So literally we're sitting at the airport, they're canceling. We realize we're not gonna make the plane. I mean, the
Yeah.
next gig, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I remember it was in San Antonio, and I remember that night we got into San Antonio like kind of late, like probably 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, something like that. Too late to make the gig. And I remember the guys were all going to go out afterwards. They had figured it out. You know, I think Prince played the bass from behind the stage or something.
Oh,
And
probably mad as hell.
Matt and Lisa played the keyboard parts and stuff.
Yeah.
Jerome stood where Terry normally stands.
Okay.
Like, and you know, put a hat on or whatever. So it was like, and I guess I actually sounded good from what I understand.
Yeah.
I still never seen footage from that gig. But anyway, so afterwards there was a gig, or there was a club afterwards everybody was going to go to. So Terry was like, nah, I ain't going, whatever. I said, I'm going to go. So I went to the club, and everybody's like, man, y'all killed it, man. Y'all killed it. And I'm like, going, oh, man. Right? So now fast forward to Prince. Only thing Prince says to us is, that's what you get for going down and seeing those girls. He thought we were going to Atlanta to go see some girls, right?
Mm.
And we just kind of went, okay, cool. So, and he had told us don't produce any other bands, right?
Right.
So now, a week later, Billboard magazine, there's a picture of me and Terry with the SOS band.
Ooh.
We're literally hiding every Billboard magazine that we find. Prince would always have his billboard, and
Right.
we would see it, and we'd be like, throw it away or lose it or whatever.
Shit.
And I remember him going to one of the managers and he's like, where's my billboard? Where's my billboard? And they're like, oh, we don't know. But there was this girl named Jamie Shoup. And
Okay.
Jamie Shoup was one of the managers.
Mm-hmm.
And she was on our side. She was
Yeah.
like, she was trying to hide stuff. And she was like, I'm not going to say anything. So anyway, we think we've gotten away with everything pretty good, right?
Mm-hmm.
So now tour ends. Now it's the summer of 83. We're now going to go mix the SOS band record.
Right.
And so we had arranged it with Steve Hodge, who was Leon Silver's engineer.
Yep.
But we knew Steve's name just from looking at the liner notes on all the records. And we're like, we love Steve Hodge. We know he works at Larrabee Studio. Let's just hire him.
Yeah.
Right? So anyway, we get a call from Prince. He says, meet me at Sunset Sound at 5 o'clock or whatever. And we were like, oh, okay, cool. So we go to we say, okay, well, I guess we're going to go to Sunset Sound. Because between the two things, it's obviously our allegiances with the time.
Right.
We go to Sunset Sound. First person we see is the accountant. And when we saw the accountant, we said, uh-oh, he's going to give us our last check.
Right.
But he just walks by us, and his name is Fred Moultrie. Fred walks by us, and he just goes, y'all have a good session. And we're like, okay. So now we get in this little room, probably about as big as this little area right here.
Uh-huh.
Prince is sitting where you're sitting, Terry, me, and then across the way was Morris and Jesse.
Okay.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
And Prince just goes, I told you guys not to produce other bands.
Oh, yeah.
We said, yeah. And you produce the SOS band? We said, yeah. He said, so you're fired. I said, okay. And I got up and walked out. Terry tried to reason with him a little bit.
Uh-huh.
Terry comes out about 5 minutes later. We looked at each other, said, what do you want to do? Yeah, we might as well go to this other studio and mix this SOS band record, right? So we walk in. We walk into Larrabee studio. We had never met Steve Hodge.
Mm-hmm.
Just hired him, but never knew him.
Mm-hmm.
We walked in. He said, hey, what's up, guys? We go, hey, Steve. He said, nice to meet you. He said, nice to meet you. He said, what's wrong? And we said, oh, we just got fired from the time. He said, oh, that's messed up. We said, yeah. He said, well, I don't think you have anything to worry about because this song here is a smash. And he hit play, and the Steve Hodge mix of Just Be Good to Me comes out of these big-ass speakers at Larrabee. And we were like, oh, shit. So literally went from being fired to mixing our first hit in like an hour, 2 hour period. It was like, it's Hollywood. It's Hollywood.
Come on. Listen, all right. I got to stay focused because we could sit here for hours. Obviously, you guys are known for your sound, but you're just as known for your look. Who came up with the fedoras and the sunglasses? Where did that come from? Like, where did that whole idea? Because it works
Yeah.
and it's
So
just as iconic as your music, but who came up with that?
okay, so it was kind of a little bit of an evolution. When the time first started in Minneapolis, there was always these thrift stores.
Hmm.
And as we talked about, our moms were very much into us looking nice and, representing ourselves nice.
Yeah.
And so we would go to thrift stores and we'd go buy a suit in a thrift store for like 15 bucks. And then we'd pay, maybe another 15 bucks to have it tailored, so
Yeah.
that it fit okay. But that was the clothing. That's the clothing we would wear to try to look nice.
Yeah.
And Prince's thing was you should look the same on stage as off stage. So
Okay.
that became the suits and that became our thing.
Right.
The hat, I have a picture of Terry in a hat from probably about the time I met him with the red, black. He's still got the red, black, and green base.
Hmm.
He's probably 15 years old at this point.
Yeah.
Got a suit with a hat on.
Yeah.
And hats were something that in his family, all the men in his family that he knew wore hats.
Mm.
So that was always a thing. And when initially I wasn't really a hat person,
Hmm.
but then hanging out with Terry, it just kind of became, okay, I'm gonna go with the hats.
Yeah.
The sunglasses part, I think I don't know how it evolved exactly, but I know when we used to have to take pictures and stuff all the time,
Mhm.
we always hated taking pictures.
Mm.
So we'd always put these glasses on,
Mhm, mhm.
and that would be like our thing. And then nobody knew if we were
Yeah, right.
asleep
Right,
or
right, right,
blinking
right, right,
or
right,
whatever.
right.
But yeah, it was just sort of an evolution, And then the thing that solidified it was when we were doing the pictures for the Pandemonium album. I think it was the Pandemonium
Mhm,
album.
mhm,
And the guy, Jeff Katz is his name, who was a photographer.
mhm.
Um, he took a bunch of pictures of us, and then he's just asked Terry. He said, "Can I do a couple pictures of just you two?"
Mhm.
We were like, "Okay, cool." And he did what we call kind of the icon picture, where
Okay.
Terry and I are looking off two directions.
Yes.
That was just literally one shot that he took at the end of the time session,
Wow.
and
That became you guys is like, yeah,
that
that's
became
yeah.
like the
Mhm.
thing.
Yeah.
And I
Such a
just think
cool shot too.
we just stuck with it because we always thought a suit and a hat and all that, it just looked nice.
Yeah.
And we also thought it was timeless because we had lived through our parents dressing like that, seeing it
Mhm.
in old movies and that whole thing.
Yeah.
And then when we go to particularly when we go to towns that were college towns to
Yeah.
play back in the time
Mhm.
days, and we go to the thrift store to try to find stuff, they'd all be sold out because everybody
Mm.
would be trying to dress like
Right,
us.
that's dope.
And so, I mean, that whole thrift shop thing, and it happened in LA because there was a bunch of thrift shops in LA,
Yeah.
and they'd always be out of suits. We'd go to a
That's
town to try to get
crazy.
suits, couldn't find them.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
It
So
worked.
yeah. And we just kind of stuck with it because we still feel like a suit is still there's an elegance to it, there's a class to it.
Sure.
Um, and it's just, we're old dogs now. We're not trying to learn new tricks at this point,
No, you're timeless. You're
Yeah.
timeless, man.
Yeah.
And that's really what the suit represents. Like just what you've created, which is timeless music, which brings me to I've always been fascinated with the recording process, even before I was in the music industry. And
Mhm.
I've seen little clips and stories about how you would, or how Control
Mhm.
came about
Mhm.
and recording with Janet and everything, and just seeing how the songs came,
Mhm.
to fruition. What was it actually like recording? Like, what was her mentality like? And I understand that she was trying to get from under her parents' tutelage. She was getting older,
Mhm.
and she wanted to find her own way. But I saw one clip where you guys were all making fun of her and everything. It's
Mhm.
like I thought that was cool. But what was the mentality of Janet? Like, what what was the process of creating those records, and how did she come about? Were there conversations first,
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
before the music?
Yeah. Well, just like you talked about how we had our conversations before we
Yeah.
start working on a record,
Yeah.
because you got to try to get to know, at least in our minds, we try to get to know people,
Yeah.
the way they spoke, the language they used, the stories they would tell. to shape what the songs would be,
Yeah.
so that the songs were true to the artist.
Yeah.
And Janet was a great example of that because, first of all, coming to Minneapolis took her out of her comfort zone of LA.
Right.
We'd said no bodyguards. Bring a friend with you. She brought a girlfriend of hers. We gave her back, this is before GPS, we gave her a Thomas guide. We said, here's the hotel, here's the studio, here's, I don't know, Blockbuster Video if you want to rent a movie.
Right.
Here's the sushi place if you want to get sushi or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
But she had to drive herself there.
Yeah.
She had to figure it out.
Yeah.
So what control
awesome.
happened was that it was literally her growing up and having to be on her own and be responsible for herself at the same time the album was being made.
Yeah.
And so we just kind of captured that. But the first 3 or 4 days, we didn't even go to the studio. We just hung out, just kind of, went to movies, went to the clubs, hung out at the lake.
Yeah.
And just, right? And so what happened was at one point, she finally goes, when are we going to get started? And we said, oh, we're started. And we showed her the opening lines to Control. When I was 17, I did what people told me.
Wow.
Did what my father said, let my mother mold me.
Yeah.
So when she looked at those lyrics, she said, well, wait, this is what we've been talking about. And we said, yeah.
Right.
And she said, so, well, we're going to write about whatever we talk about? Yeah. And then she said, oh, well, I want to talk about this and I want to talk about that.
Wow.
But it was like the light bulb went off in her head. Like because she hadn't really been asked. She had made really good records before.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, with Leon Silvers,
Sure.
with Renee,
Sure.
with Renee and Angela,
Yeah.
Giorgio Moroder,
Yeah.
Jesse Johnson. She had made some great records, but they weren't necessarily true to her because nobody really asked, what do you want to sing about? What's important to you? And, Nasty came because some guys were bothering her and talking nasty to her. And I remember people were going, don't you want to save her? And we're like, no, she'll handle it. She'll figure it out.
Right.
And she did. She came over to us afterwards and she said, do you see those guys bothering me? We said, yeah. She said, why didn't you come over and help me? And we said, well, you're standing here talking to us now. You must be okay.
Right.
And she was like, oh, yeah, I guess you're right.
That's right.
So it was just kind of going through the process of that and then writing songs. But going into doing Janet, I don't know. I think you know the story, though. There was another artist we were supposed to do. I don't know. Do you know this story?
I don't know.
Okay. So John McClain, who is now the A&R person at A&M Records, he, of course, remembered us from the Leon Silvers meeting back in the day after the basketball game. So he had asked us to produce an artist on the label on A&M, and we said, okay, cool. Well, that artist decided that she didn't want to work with us. So he called us and he said,
story.
oh, okay. So he called us and he said, I'm really embarrassed, man. Is there some other artists on our label that you guys want to produce? Because I really want to work with you guys. And so we said, yeah, send us the roster. Right. So he faxes the roster up. There's fax machines, which people don't use anymore.
Yeah.
He faxes the roster up. Terry and I look at the roster. We go, our fingers both stop on the same name, Janet Jackson. So we called him and we said, John, we want to do Janet Jackson. And he said, okay, great. Couple songs? We said, no, we want to do the whole album.
Come on.
And he was like, you do? And we were like, yeah. He said, okay. So then it was like, so they set a meeting up.
Wow.
And I remember at the meeting, it was really weird. So at the meeting, they played her the last record we had done, which happened to be Heat of Heat by Patty Austin. So, heat is so hot. Yeah. With all these big lush strings.
Yes,
and because we were on our Quincy vibe.
Jimmy,
we were
I
trying
didn't
to make
know you did that.
Yeah.
I did not know you did that song.
Yep.
That makes sense. I hear it now.
Yep.
Shit. Okay, cool. Let's continue.
Yeah. So, but the thing that was interesting about it, so when they played that song, she said, I'm not sure I really want my record to sound like that. And we were like, no. That was for Quincy. That's our Quincy Jones trying to be Quincy Jones.
Right.
Your record is going to be a whole different thing.
Yeah.
It's going to be your sound, whatever you want it to be. And then she was like, okay. And I said, but you got to come to Minneapolis. No bodyguards. We tell her all that. Her dad was at the meeting and her dad just goes,
Joe.
Yeah, Joe. Joe goes, as we're walking out, he goes, you guys are from Minneapolis. And we said, yeah. And he says, Prince is from Minneapolis. We said, yeah. He said, don't have my daughter sounding like Prince. We said, okay, you got it, Mr. Jackson. No problem.
Yes, sir, Joe.
Yes, sir. And that was really our only instruction. And that was actually that's probably the last time we talked to him. Because at that point,
Wow.
she came to Minneapolis, we made the record, and what we knew we wanted to get out of Janet, what we knew was when she was a young girl, she had so much attitude. If you look at any of the
Yes,
clips,
yes,
right?
yes, yes, yes.
As a little girl, she had
Doom,
all this.
doom, doom, doom,
Yeah,
doom. Yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah. Right, right, right.
But then the records she was making at that point were all these kind of pretty, yeah, right? And we're
Sweet
like going, yeah, they were sweet records. And we were like going, where's the attitude? So our whole
Mm.
thing was we want to learn about her lyrically to figure out what it is. And we already had a song that we had cut called He Doesn't Know I'm Alive, which was kind of our test song, if
Okay.
you will,
Okay.
to see, how she could sing. And she sang great. And then we was like, okay, now we know.
Right.
So now it's like, even like a song like Nasty, when we did Nasty, when she went in to sing it, she said, sitting in the movie show. No, Janet, sing it like, remember when you had a cold the other day and you were singing and you were like singing like this?
Right.
I said, you got to sing it like that.
Yes.
And
Yes.
she was like, really? It's like, yeah. And it was cool. So what happened was she sang it and she's like, sitting in the movie show, like all right, with all the attitude, right?
Yeah.
And when she heard it back, she didn't like it when she heard it, but I said, now give me a day to comp the vocal together, right?
Yeah.
And when she came back the next day and heard it, she loved it. But yeah, but that was the thing. And so we wanted to give her songs with attitude. So we really cut very aggressive tracks,
Yes.
almost as if we were creating them, not to sound sexist, but like we were creating them for a man.
Yes.
And because if you think about the female singers that were out at that point, Patti LaBelle, I think, had a record out. I think Anita Baker might have had a record out. It was like,
Sweet.
it was sweet.
Mhm.
And we wanted to be separate from
Yes.
that and really create and get that attitude.
Aggressive. Yeah,
Plus,
yeah.
we knew she was a dancer.
Right.
So we wanted to have things that would make her want to dance.
Yes.
And
Yes. That's crazy.
so that was sort of the game plan when we did it. I remember it took us about 6 weeks to do the record. John
That's
McClane
it?
came up. Yep.
the Control record?
Yeah, 6 weeks. John McClane came up and listened to it. And he was A&R. And like all A&R guys, he said, I just need one more.
Yeah, I know.
Right? That's
yeah.
always the A&R.
Yeah.
We said, what are you talking about, man? And he said, because I mean, we played Control and Nasty and When I Think of You and Funny How Time Flies and Pleasure Principle. And right, we're playing all these records, man. And we're like, we're good, right? And he goes, nah, he said, I just need one more. So anyway, Terry and I had started working on our own album.
Yeah, those are good, but
one
one more.
just
Give me
still
one more.
So Terry and I had started working on our own album that we were going to do. And we started playing him tracks from that. We just said, hey, listen to this. We're working on our own album, right? And about the third track we played, he said, that's the one I need for Janet. I said, what are you talking about, man? He said, that's the track I need for Janet. He said, no, man. He said, well, play it for her, man. If she likes it, give it to her. Like, okay, fine. So the next day, Janet comes to the studio. We just put the track on. Didn't say anything, just put the track on. We watched her. She's watching TV. And then she kind of starts doing like this. And she comes to the doorway. She points at Terry and me. And then when the song goes off, she goes, who's that for? And we said, well, you if you want it. She said, I want it. That song became What Have You Done For Me Lately? First single. Yep. Yep.
Come on.
And so I credit John McClane with making that happen. And the funny thing is the song after What Have You Done For Me Lately is a song called You Can Be Mine. Yeah. Which was also from our Jam and Lewis album that we were working on. Because he was like, you got another one? I was like, yeah, we got another one. Which is why those songs kind of segue together. Because that was the idea of the album. So yeah, that was the thing that got it
I
going.
love these guys, right? I'm going to get into it, but I'm going to say this and then I'm going to get to the question. But one more chance. Give me just one more chance.
Yeah.
No one know. You don't know that, do you? It was a B-side.
Mm-hmm.
And what's funny
Yeah.
is the person
That's
that gave it to me was Questlove.
Ah.
He let me hear it first.
Uh-huh. That song originally was a Jackson's song.
It sounds like it.
It was a Jackson song. Randy Jackson wrote it.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Randy?
Yeah, Randy. Mm-hmm. Randy wrote probably in my top 5 of all time songs.
What's that?
Shake Your Body Down to the Ground.
He wrote that?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay, shout out to Randy. I didn't know Randy had it like that. Like,
Oh yeah,
I thought
no,
Randy was just the baby.
yeah, right. No, no, Randy was rhythmic.
Who arranged the harmonies for you guys? Like who did it? Like the Janet harmonies are so beautiful. Like, was it who did it? Was it Janet? Like, who came up with those sevenths and those we call it, me and the guys call them crack notes, where you kind of
Yeah.
like put them in the cracks. Like
Yes.
who because part of why we arrange, again, you got to understand how influential you guys have been. Like, we literally took a name of one of your songs and made it the name of our fucking group.
Right. That is
Okay.
true. That
So
is true.
so
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
let's keep it all the way transparent here. Okay. Jam and Lewis are in our DNA even before they met us. Okay. This is why this is such a big moment for me. But who arranged the harmonies?
So the harmonies, that was me. But I'll tell you how that happened. So at the beginning of this conversation about 4 hours ago, we talked about. No, I'm just kidding.
It's all good.
I'm just kidding. But we talked about America. We talked about Seals and Cross. We talked about the Carpenters.
Yep.
And also, as I mentioned, that song was a Jackson song. One of the things that the Jacksons did is they always did block harmonies.
Yes.
All the notes weren't moving.
Yes. Yes.
It would be just
yes.
in the chord.
Yes. Yes.
But then there would always be a melody on top of it.
Yes.
So that was the thing that really influenced the way that I arranged background vocals.
Yeah.
I also Terry Lewis always would say, and not to be too much of a nerd fest, but let's say you're doing a song like, I don't know, Ventura Highway, right? By America, right?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
So I think it's a G major 7 to a D major 7 are the two, is the movement or something like that, right? So that's 4 notes apart, right? 4 things apart. Terry would always say he liked when I would do chords where the whole chord would change by just moving one note. So I would always do, as you say, the spaces, right? Is that what you call them? The crack notes. I would always I would always play in the crack notes, because rather than going 4 notes here and then 4 notes here,
Yeah.
he would make it so you play those same 2 chords, but you're just moving one note in order to do that.
Yeah.
And sorry if it's a little nerdy.
No.
Right? Okay.
No. Those
When I arranged the harmonies,
yeah.
that was the way I would always arrange it. I would arrange it based on the keyboard inversions that I was doing.
Mm-hmm.
And it was one of those things where, once again, where Janet, the trust that she had,
Yeah.
because when notes rub against each other, it doesn't sound right.
Right.
You know? So if I'm doing like One More Chance, like the harmony on that, if you hear the harmony, there's notes that are rubbing against each other.
That's beautiful.
And those are tough, but they make it emotional. That's what makes it emotional.
Yes.
But it's tough to sing. You have to trust.
Absolutely.
So I remember when we first went in to do the harmonies on, might have been like Let's Wait a While or something like that. And you hear the melody is, let's wait a while before it's too late. But underneath it's, let's wait a while before it's too late. Let's wait a while before it's too late. Right. And it's like that. And it doesn't sound right until it's done.
Yeah.
And I used to say
100%.
to her, just trust me, when it's done, it's going to sound right. I know this doesn't sound right to sing this note, but it's going to sound right.
Yes.
And that might have been the song that when we did it, when she heard the final, mix of the harmonies, she was like,
yeah.
She never questioned again.
Yeah.
If I'd say these 2 notes rub against each other, she just trusted it.
Those notes that rub are the best.
I'll tell you the other, my favorite background singers, Janet was one of them, because Janet would do all of her vocals. And that was also intentional. We always wanted the record to sound like a Janet record. From every note, we didn't want another singer on there.
Yeah.
But the other person, and they share the same birthday, Ralph Tresvant.
Oh, really?
Tresvant from New Edition.
Yeah.
Did every harmony that you ever hear on any of the records we did.
You hear it too.
He did all the harmony notes. Now, the other guys would come in and basically use him as the guide. But he'd sit in there for 4 or 5 hours doing every vocal harmony. You think about the harmonies on Sensitivity, right? Which are those harmonies are tough to sing. But he would do it, and he'd be like, I can get it better. I can get it better. Like, he was like that. So him and Janet, for doing the backgrounds and that kind of layering and that, they were the best.
Let me tell you something. Just that. And the beautiful thing about their production, right? And we're gonna get into minutia of it, but it's it's the turnarounds. When you guys played on Bend the Knee for us for the first time, first off, these dudes had us waiting 4 hours in their lounge because they were getting the song together. They didn't have it written yet. So we had to wait for 4 hours for them to finish the record. But it was worth the wait because when we walked in and they played it, I can't explain, and Jimmy's stellar performance with in the vocals. Yeah. Give it up for Jimmy's vocals. They were fantastic. I'm needling him, and he knows that, so I'm breaking his balls. It was awful, but we understood it, and it was cool. We interpreted it enough for us to get out what we need to get out. But when I say, when they played the chorus, can we go back to the days I love a song? Everybody tell me to be. I was used to, oh God, give me the reason I'm down on bended knee. I was looking for the major. I'm down on bended, I cried. I cried. No bullshit. I was stood in the studio in flight time, and that turnaround happened, and a tear just shot out of my face. Like I wasn't even expecting to cry. I was listening to it, and that down up, and we had like I was like, oh my God. And we tried to give them the best vocal performance we could, because it was that beautiful to us. I'm telling you, it's the turnarounds with Jam and Lewis. And also, and I'm gonna say this, the sounds you guys come up. Why did you, what is this? What is that?
Oh, yeah.
Like why? Like, hold on. And then it goes into the dopest shit ever. But my point is, why that sound? Like, that's why I love these, because it's the sonics, it's the sounds, it's the effects, it's the stuff behind the stuff.
Yeah.
That makes the records what they are. What was that, first off? What was that sound?
The sound on Miss You Much is, there's a keyboard called a Mirage.
Okay.
And Mirage is the sound that actually is on Nasty. So when you hear the gung gung gang, dun 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 dun, that's a Mirage keyboard. When you hold down basically the bass note sound, gung gung, when you hold it down, it just would make that noise. And so I wanted to have a sound that tied control, or not really control necessarily, but kind of tied the control sound into the Rhythm Nation sound. And that was the sound to me that did it. So that's why that became just sort of the signature sonic ID sort of for Janet.
Yes.
The interesting thing was when we worked with Michael later on, I have a note. When we moved to our studio where we're at now, the warehouse, or the hangar as people call it now since it's flight time. But I remember Michael, when I was working with him, he had taped a note to my keyboard, and he said, that sound that's on The Knowledge and on those, can you put that on this record that we're working on? And I remember thinking, okay, yeah, that's cool. Anyway, I never really thought any more about it. When we moved places, we had a bunch of boxes full of tons of stuff, right?
Yeah.
And we were going to throw them all out. And I just happened to open one of the boxes. I just said, let me see what's in this box. And I opened the box. It was the handwritten note from Michael. Wow. Asking me to put the thing. And I told Terry, I said, we got to open all these boxes.
Wow.
Because there's artifacts in here that are really cool. So we went through and did all of that.
Yeah.
But yeah, that sound is like a signature sound. Now, the funny thing is, and I know your audience is definitely, music lovers and people like that.
Yeah.
Music nerds.
Yes.
I can't find that sound. It was on a floppy disk. I cannot find that sound.
You cannot find it.
I cannot find that sound. I mean, obviously Janet has it, but I'm looking for the actual disc that it was on. And the company doesn't exist anymore. Insonic doesn't exist anymore. I was talking to a couple of people actually had DM'd me on Instagram,
Mhm.
and they gave me a couple of sites that said, "Look for it on this site, look for it on this site," and I
Right.
still haven't been able to find it yet.
Wow.
So it's the weirdest thing, but it's the one I have every floppy disk from every sound that we used during that whole era of music, except for that one. And I
Wow.
know it'll pop up at some point in time,
Yeah.
and there may be somebody, I'm saying that in your audience that might go, "Oh, that's just something, something," and they probably have it. So,
Wow. Yeah.
anyway,
Well, you guys heard it. So if you
yeah,
guys have the sound, please
yeah,
locate, or rather DM
yeah, damn it.
Jimmy
Yeah,
on the IG.
yep.
He'd greatly appreciate it. I would greatly
Yeah,
appreciate
yeah.
it.
No,
Okay.
I'd love to have the actual disc with the sound on it.
Yeah.
Yeah, Bobby,
Bobby
exactly,
stole it.
Bobby, that's right.
Bobby took it.
Bobby took it.
That's so funny.
That's
Now,
right.
now let's go. Let's switch gears to your dad,
Mhm.
Cornbread Harris. He has a book
He has a
they
book.
came out with. It came out what in August of last
Yes,
year.
uh-huh.
Can you tell us a little bit about the book?
Yeah, so the book is called Deeper Blues, and I mentioned my dad earlier as, playing keyboards around the house and always doing that and gigging. The story with my dad is that, I was a drummer in his band when I was 12 years old,
Mhm.
and I'd gone to a recording session with him and he had done a record. First of all, I should say, going back, in 1955, he did the very first rock and roll record that was done in Minnesota.
Wow.
It was with a group called the Augie Garcia Quintet, and he
Mhm.
played with the band. He was the piano player for the band.
Yeah.
And then it was called Hi Ho Silver, and the flip side of it was a song called Going to Chicago,
Mm.
which Cornbread sang the lead on.
Yeah.
So it's, the first rock and roll record that was made in Minnesota. So anyway, he evolved and, made music and all that. So when he married my mom, he said he was going to give up music and work a regular job and raise his son.
Yeah.
But still on the weekends, he would gig and do different things. So at one point, there was a record that came out that he had played on, and I'd gone to the session as a kid.
Right.
And there's pictures in the book of me actually at this session, right?
Okay.
That's pretty cool. And so we ended up, he wanted to go and tour behind this record that was now beginning to kind of take off a little bit. And I remember my mom would say to him, "No, you said you're not going to do music. You're going to, work a regular job and raise your son."
Mm.
And even probably at that point, I might have been 10 or 11 years old. I just remember thinking, give up music? Oh,
Yeah.
heck no. That's
Right.
crazy.
Right.
Like, go. You should go. You tour this record, right?
Yeah.
And he didn't. Well, a few years later, after now I'd met Terry and I was, doing my thing musically, one day he went to work and didn't come back home.
Wow.
And so it was just me and my mom. And I knew why he felt he needed to leave. I didn't agree with it,
Yeah.
obviously, but
Sure.
I didn't. And so we were basically estranged for almost 50 years.
Shh.
And the way we came back together was just as, God's plan. So there's a guy named St. Paul Peterson. St. Paul Peterson played with the group The Family.
Mhm.
He was the one that originally sang Nothing Compares to You. You
Mhm.
remember that back in
Yes.
the day? And Screams of Passion. He also was the guy that took my place in the time when Prince fired us.
Yeah.
So fast forward now to a few years back, and St. Paul just DM'd me, and he just said, "Hey, I'm in the studio with your dad working on some music." And I just said, "Hey, how's he doing?" And he said, "He's doing good. He's got a good song, whatever." Great. So then I was telling the story to someone that, I was telling a story about how at one point in time I was never going to get married and I was never going to have kids
Mm.
because I never wanted what happened to my dad to happen to me,
Mm.
right? And I told a story about I dropped out of high school to pursue music.
Mhm.
And I thought my mom was going to hit the ceiling, and she just said, "As long as I see you really going for it, you're really working towards it." And I always thought that was really weird. So somewhere around 3 years ago, I told that story, and somebody said, "Do you think your mom let you do that to pursue your dream because she didn't let your dad do it?"
Mm. Mm.
And at that moment, and after raising my kids now, who are
Mhm.
now I've graduated from school,
Mhm.
I realized, uh-oh, I know he's walking around with a burden of guilt and I need to lift that from him.
Oh, that's awesome.
And so I reached out to the book's author, whose name's Andrea Swenson. And she's written a ton of books.
Mhm.
She back in the day was the Prince Whisperer. You know,
Mm.
Prince would always talk to her and give her like little things. And she wrote liner notes for a lot of the records. And when they do reissues of the record, she's the one that writes the liner notes.
Yeah.
And she also did a book about Minneapolis, kind of the pre-Prince Minneapolis,
Yeah.
about the things that kind of led to Prince and myself and all
Yeah.
the other people. So anyway, she was very cool. So I called her and I said, "Do you have my dad's number or the manager's number, actually?"
Mhm.
And she said, "Yes, as a matter of fact, I do." So I called his manager and I just said, "Hey, I'd like to see my dad." I said, "I'm going to be in town because Stephen Hill, who was working for the Billboard Awards, he had wanted us to do Optimistic with Sounds of Blackness.
Mhm.
But they were going to shoot it at Paisley Park." So he
Mm.
said, come to Minneapolis. We'll shoot it at Paisley Park. You guys introduce it, whatever. And this was, the George Floyd murder had happened and all these other different things. So it was like, okay, it was a great time to go back to Minneapolis and, try to, shed some good light on it
Yeah.
as best we could.
Yeah.
And so anyway, when I went back to Minneapolis, the manager said, "I'll set something up for you. There's a daycare thing he goes to on Mondays and Wednesdays just to be with his friends and that. And I'll set it up. And then that way, if it goes well, because you haven't seen him for 50 years, if it goes well, great. If it doesn't, you have a flight to catch." Because I did. I had a flight to catch.
Yeah.
So my son, Max, came up with me.
Yeah.
We went over to visit him. And my dad's word for it was euphoric. Because I told him that I have no ill will, I have no resentment, I have nothing. Thank you for the lessons that you taught me, because those are the same lessons I taught to my kids,
Mm.
And so the ability to do that was great. He said he felt like a weight had been lifted off of him
That's awesome.
and that. So we talked for about an hour. And it was funny. He told Max all the same things that I was telling Max, because Max does music, right?
I was about to say he produces too, right?
Yes, Max is
Mhm.
Max is totally me at that age, right?
Yeah.
And he and so my dad gave him all the same advice and all the same stuff. And I said, "Okay, now you see where I get it from."
Yeah.
And the other funny thing is, my kids, I remember whenever if it was the Grammys or wherever, we'd always be the last ones to leave because, I was taking pictures or signing autographs or whatever. And I remember my kids would always go, why are we always the last ones to leave? Do you have to say hello to everybody?" And I'd be like, "Yeah, because you never know where these people have come from or if they'll ever have a chance to say hello to me again." And that's what my dad taught me, because I was that kid when he would do gigs. I'd be like, "Dad, do we have to sign every autograph and take every picture?" And he'd go, "You don't know where these people have come
So
from."
you were doing what
I was doing
taught you
exactly what
without-
he taught me.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah. So that was the thing. So anyway, it was a good meeting. It was great. He got a chance to meet one of his grandkids, and that was cool. And Max loved the experience. It was great.
Yeah.
Got back to LA on that Monday. On that Tuesday, Andrea called, the author of the book. She said, "Hey, I'm going to go see your dad today. Would you come on Zoom? Because there's some things we can't remember. We're trying to piece some things together." I said, "Yeah." So I come on the Zoom. And we have this conversation. It's not even about the book. It was supposed to be about the book, but it's not even about the book. It's just us reminiscing about different things, And she recorded it. And there was a book called Tuesday at Maury's,
Okay.
where literally somebody would visit somebody every Tuesday, and it was this whole story that developed from that.
Mhm.
We basically turned into that on Zoom. Every single Tuesday, we'd get together for at least an hour. We'd tell stories back and forth. He'd show me things he was working on. I'd show him things I was working on.
Mhm.
The kids would come on. Lisa would come on sometimes.
Mhm.
And we would just do this thing. And it was initially to finish the book. But the interesting thing was, once the book was finished,
Yeah.
we still do it every Tuesday.
Oh, that's beautiful.
And it kind of
That's
united us. It
beautiful.
brought us back together. And then for his birthday, he wanted me to come up and play with him. And I hadn't played with him since I was, 13 years old, 12 years old.
Yeah.
But I was his drummer. But I came up and I played keyboards with him,
Mhm.
which was interesting. And we had just beautiful musical conversation with each other. I had a guy named Joe Brandmeier, who was he's a documentary producer.
Mhm.
I had him just shoot it. And then he edited it down to like a little 9-minute piece. And then I sent it to him as a Father's Day gift. And when everybody that saw it, I sent it to also friends of mine. I think I
Yeah.
probably sent it to you.
Yes, you did.
And everybody said, man, you got to let everybody see this because
Yes.
everybody has a story with their parents or
Yeah.
the people, their loved
100%.
ones. And everybody needs to see this. So I actually posted it on social media like a year after.
Mm.
I just put it up and the response was amazing.
Yeah.
And now the book is out.
Yeah.
And people seem to really find a lot of themselves in it, even if it's not the exact story.
I can already tell it's a lot of, yeah.
Yeah, it's just you've always had those relationships, and when you think that there's no way that a relationship can come back together, and like I say, after 50 years of not being together and not really speaking to each other,
Yeah.
we're in this beautiful relationship. And he's celebrating a birthday in about a month, and I'm going to go up and play. And actually, he wants me to play drums.
He's 90.
He'll be 98. He'll be 98. He plays every week. There's a place called Palmer's Bar that he plays every week with his
Come on.
band. And they, they do their thing. Music keeps him young.
Happy birthday, Cornbread. And God bless you with many, many more.
Yeah.
You raised an amazing son. Straight up.
Actually, reading his book, I learned so much because we didn't talk about stuff when he was like the things that happened to him as a kid. That he was adopted. He went through surgeries and stuff because his legs were wrong and he couldn't walk correctly. And he had this whole life that I had no idea. His love of music. He was in the service and he played like in the band, in the Army band.
Yeah.
Like that was his thing. And all these different chapters that I had no idea about. But then the reconciliation is the end of the book, and
That's
I did
everything.
the afterword for it. Yeah. So it's pretty cool. So anyway, it's available everywhere, wherever. I'll do my plug. It's available everywhere. Amazon,
You guys
wherever
see it, you
got
pick it up.
Yeah.
I actually downloaded it on Kindle last
Did you?
Yeah.
Okay. And it's wonderful. And Andrea Swinson has her own website, andreaswinson.com.
Mhm.
And she also did an album called Anthology.
Okay.
It has recordings starting with the 1955 Going to Chicago recording that he did, up through the newest recordings that he's doing now.
And where can we find this?
And that will be, if you go to andreaswinson.com, you can find it there. You can also find it on Bandcamp also.
So the book's available everywhere. It's hard copies.
It's hard copies,
Barnes
yes.
and Nobles, you can go
Yes.
there.
You know who it's funny, I saw A. Marie the other night
Oh,
at Giveon did a celebration the other night for
Okay.
his 5th anniversary of his album.
yeah.
And she was there, and she has a book club. And that's one of the things we talked about was my dad's book.
Oh,
And then somebody else, Terry Cruz's wife,
okay.
has a book club thing
Okay.
also.
Okay.
And she's interested, so we send her the book also.
Oh, that's
But
awesome.
yeah, but it's just one of those books that I just think it's good for people to read.
Yeah.
And we are now working on an audiobook for it because there isn't an audiobook for
Right.
it.
I was looking
But-
for that.
Yeah. But we want to, he can tell the stories, we can tell the stories.
Yeah.
And I just think it'd be a lot of fun to do that. So that's a project for this year for sure.
And you will narrate it.
Yes, I'll be part of the narration
Okay.
of it. Yeah.
Great. So to 10 lucky On That Note fans, you will receive a signed, beautiful book written by Jimmy Jam's father, Cornbread Harris, about his life story. So please stay tuned, and you guys may be one of the lucky ones to pick one up. Signed. So
It's cool when we went in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. One of the things I told them said, my dad played on the very first rock and roll record, so it's in Minnesota, so it's in my genes.
yeah.
The other thing I told them that they didn't know was I was actually a winner on Rock and Roll Jeopardy back when that show used to
Were
be
you?
on. Yep. That show, VH1 used to do Rock and Roll
Yeah, I
Jeopardy.
remember. Yes, yes.
And I used to sit in my kitchen and I used to watch it. And I'm, it's like everybody does.
Right.
Blurting out all
Right,
the
right,
answers.
right,
I know
right.
every
Right.
question in that case.
right.
And I'm like, oh man, these people. So anyway, I'd done the show. There was a show called The List that they used to have back
Yep,
in the
I
day.
remember that too.
I did that show,
Mhm.
and when it was done, they said, "Oh, you did a great job. Is there any other shows you'd like to do?" And I said, "I'd like to do Rock and Roll Jeopardy."
Mhm.
And they said, "Oh, we're not filming it right now, but as soon as we start filming, we'll let you know." So they let me know. I came in. I was on with Leif Garrett and Kevin Cronin from Mario Speedwagon.
Oh, wow, that's crazy.
And the funny thing was when I walked into the green room, they were all, slightly inebriated, we'll
Sure.
say. And when I walked in, they said, "Oh, shit, it's Jimmy Jam. He's a producer. They know everything." and then they said, hey, you want to drink? You want to drink?
Right.
And I said, I don't drink.
Right.
I said, I don't drink. And they said, "Oh, shit, and he doesn't drink?"
Right.
Oh, forget it.
Basically, I'm going to whoop y'all ass on this show.
I trounced them. I trounced. But I'm a little, not embarrassed to say, the one category I didn't know where they actually scored some points, because I just didn't buzz in, was Bruce Springsteen.
No, really?
There was a Bruce Springsteen category.
Okay.
And I didn't know it. And I was like, I don't know Bruce Springsteen. And that made me go, learn about Bruce Springsteen.
Well, that was Jersey Rock. You know what I mean?
I know. No, but it's cool.
No.
I got a chance to know his manager now and that. So it's cool.
Awesome.
But yeah, those kinds of stories are a lot of fun. And just think about the journey that music has taken us on.
Yeah.
It's raised our kids. It's taken us around the world.
Yeah.
Relationships that we would not have.
It's been
Because
an
it's
absolute
the
blessing.
common factor of everything, because it's not people, because a lot of people, it's not even whether they like you or not, but they like your songs.
Yes.
And the songs have meant something to them.
Yes. Yes.
And it's such a blessing, man.
This podcast is dedicated to music, to songs, and the many beautiful stories that they create. That's what this whole thing is about. And it's about really just connection too, because the songs that I listen to, the songs that you were inspired and listened to or created, are the songs that the people that are watching or listening have connected to as well. So that is all. Music is always the tie that binds.
Yeah.
So it's one of those beautiful things, man. And we have to do a part 2, because you have way too many great stories to
I was going to say
just
we're
pass
still
by. No, we're
not
not
still
even
in the early. Do we get to 2000? I don't know.
Yeah. But let's do this.
Okay.
Give me a moment in the studio with Janet that. How about
the Michael Janet story is the one I was going to tell.
Okay, but please do tell us the story about the connection between Michael and Janet and them being in the studio together to create that amazing record, Scream.
Yeah. So it was interesting because can't remember if Michael called personally, but maybe it's probably one of his people called and said, Mike wants to do a song with Janet and whatever. Are you guys down for that? And we were like, yeah, of course we are. But then we were like, but let's find out if Janet's cool with it, because we didn't want to be, because we were always ride or die with Janet.
Yes.
There was a lot of female artists that we turned down working with back in the day, kind of, who were sort of her peers.
Yeah.
That we just didn't. We just were like, no, can't do it. So anyway, when we got the call and Janet said, "No, that's fine. She said, "To me, it's my brother's record. I'm just guesting on it." And I said, "Okay, cool." So when we started doing the tracks for the song, we had her come up to Minneapolis, and we just said, she said, "What do you need me for?" And we said, "Just sit here. We just need inspiration."
Right.
And we literally did, I think, 5 or 6 tracks that we thought all could possibly work, right? And I remember when we played the tracks, she said, "I know the one he's going to like."
Right.
And we said, "Really?" And she said, "Oh, yeah." I said, "How do you know?" She said, "Because I know my brother." I was like, okay. And she says, "I hope the one he doesn't like is this one." And it was the one that ended up becoming Runaway for her. Because we love that. We personally love that song. And she was like, "I love that, but I want that for myself."
Yes.
So I was like, okay, cool.
Yes.
Anyway, so we go to New York. He's working at Hit Factory.
Yep.
He's very mild-mannered and just kind of sits down and he says, "Okay, let's hear the songs." And okay, cool. And he blasts it. Like if there was, volume not supposed to go to 10, his went to about 15. It was like the loudest shit I ever heard in my life, right? So he's playing these songs. And after each song, he's like, "Oh yeah, that sounds really good. That sounds really good." And then the next one comes on, right? So then we play the songs and then he goes, "Okay, can I hear number 2 and number 5 again?" And those are the 2 songs, right? So he listens to number 2, he listens to number 5, and he says, "Okay, I really like them both, but I'm going to go with number 2." And number 2 was Scream, what ended up becoming Scream.
Crazy.
Right? And Janet just kind of looked at me like, I know what my brother likes. I know what he wants. Right? So anyway, the next day we go to his apartment, which was ironically in Trump Tower. Penthouse at Trump Tower.
Wah, wah.
Yep. Wah, wah. And he's got the track, and he's already got. She's like, okay, what do we want to do lyrically? And he's like, just put this down. And she's on her laptop, right? And he just launches in, tired of injustice, tired of the scheme. And she's like, okay, wait, tired of. She's like trying to write, and he's got the whole thing. And then we did that. We wrote her part. So then we're done. So I'm thinking, okay, next day we're going to go to the studio and record. So the next day we meet him at his apartment again, and he goes, okay, I just want to make sure we're really challenging ourselves to have every word correct. And we were like, every word sounds correct to me. Let's go.
Right.
But we have to challenge ourselves. Okay, fine. So we challenged ourselves for about 2 or 3 days. We challenged ourselves. We maybe changed one word, maybe. I don't know. I don't think we really did.
Gosh.
Anyway, we go to the studio to record. And this is right after he's gotten married to Lisa Marie Presley, right?
Mm-hmm.
So Lisa Marie's at the studio, and her and my wife start talking.
Mm-hmm.
And Michael goes into the studio, and he's wearing all the wrong stuff to be in the studio. He's got like hard
Jangly
shoes,
stuff, yeah,
jangling
right.
stuff, all kinds of stuff like you don't wear in the studio because the microphone's going to pick up every bit of stuff.
Yeah.
And I remember the engineer was there. It wasn't Bruce Swedeen. It was another guy that was just engineering the session. And I said, is this okay? And he said, oh yeah, it's fine. We were like, okay. So he walks in, and the idea was that, you know, he's going to do his vocal, then Janet's going to go do her vocal, right? So he walks in and he just goes, hey, let's go ahead and run it. I'll put the headphones on and go, just make sure it sounds good. Okay, great. He launches into, we call it the Tasmanian Devil. When the music comes on, he starts spinning and dancing.
No,
it's like the full Michael Jackson performance.
Wow.
And Terry and I are sitting there like, we're screaming like little girls.
Right.
Like it was like crazy. And he hits tired of injustice, tired of the scheme. And he sings the whole thing start to finish. It was like a blur. Song goes off. We're just sitting there frozen.
Wow.
And he goes, how was that? We're like, yeah, Mike. Yeah, that was good. That was good. He says, you want me to do another? Yeah, Mike, do another take. Okay. Janet's back in the corner. She comes between me and Terry, and she goes, I'll do my vocal in Minneapolis. She wanted no part of following that.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it was crazy.
Yeah. It's
and to me, it was the most impactful. When I think of an impactful studio session, that was it. That was the most impactful studio session ever.
Amazing.
And the other thing too, I'll say, was Michael was very competitive.
Yeah.
So when he came in after he did his part, he came in and he said, Jan, are you going to do your vocal? And she said, Michael, I think I'm going to do my vocal in Minneapolis. And he goes, oh, okay. So anyway, we go to Minneapolis. She does her vocal. She kills it. We send him the vocal. He goes, Janet's vocal sounds really good. We said, oh, good. Glad you like it. He said, it sounds really good. Oh, good, Michael. Where'd you record that? I said, in Minneapolis. He said, I'm coming to Minneapolis. And he came to Minneapolis.
And did the same thing.
He did the same thing. But we didn't. The funny thing was we maybe 10% of that vocal is from Minneapolis. There was a couple of cleanup things.
Yeah.
But pretty much everything we got in New York. We got in the New York vocal, but he wanted to compete. But he loved Minneapolis because it was winter.
Yeah.
So he could put a ski mask on and go anywhere he wanted to.
Sure,
and his place was the Mall of America.
Yeah, of course.
He spent all his time at the Mall of
Everybody's
America, went on all the
Mall
rides.
Of America in Minneapolis.
He would go on all the rides. He would do, and it was awesome. It was awesome. And then that turned into, we thought we were just done, but then after we finished Scream, he said, those other tracks. And we ended up using everyone but one. There's one track that he didn't use, but all the other tracks he used. Is It Scary he used. He used Tabloid Junkie. History, the track History.
History which Boyz II Men is on the background.
Yes. Yep. Matter of fact, y'all had, and I don't even know whether you can even imagine this, but this was back when digital tape started.
Mhm.
And there was the Sony digital track, 48 track machines, right?
Mhm.
And I remember when we did History, and the idea of History was that it was almost going to be like in movements, almost like a concert or whatever,
Mhm.
right? And so he really wanted you guys to sing on the song.
Mhm.
He said, Boyz II Men would be perfect on here. And we'd be like, oh yeah, they'd be great, right? So I remember when we recorded you guys all ended up on one 48 track Sony tape.
Mhm.
All of Michael's vocals ended up on a 48 track tape.
Mhm.
All the orchestra, we had Elmer Bernstein's orchestra,
Mhm.
like 96-piece orchestra or whatever.
Crazy.
All that ended up on one. And then the original track that we had done in Minneapolis ended up on another tape. We literally ended up with 4 48 track Sony machines. There wasn't a board that was big
I was about
enough
to say,
to handle
yeah,
it.
it didn't exist.
So we went to now what's Larrabee Now,
Yeah.
which Manny Marroquin has.
Yes. Yes.
And we literally had 2 machines in one room, 2 machines in another room, had everything tie-lined together. And literally, if you wanted to turn up a vocal part, you had to go to the other control room to turn the vocal up.
Ridiculous.
And he wouldn't let us bounce anything down. Like, so
Right.
when we would get the harmony where the harmony sounded really good,
Yeah.
we said, does that sound good, Mike? Yeah, that sounds great. I said, okay, can we just bounce that to 2 tracks now? No, I want to keep everything just in case. It's like, oh man. It was crazy. And we had a day to do the mix
Yeah.
because the next day was going to be the mastering session.
Wow. So how are you going to master that?
So with the mastering was easy because we did have to bounce it down to 2 tracks in order to
Got
get
it.
it
Yeah,
to
sure.
master it. The funny thing was though, the way the song was, it started off real funky and really clanky at the beginning.
Mhm.
Then it went to this change. And then, of course, you guys' vocals came on and the
Mhm.
song built, and that was the whole idea. Then there was a whole marching band thing in the middle of it with an announcer.
It was a lot.
It was a lot.
It was a lot.
Right?
That song was a lot.
So what was funny was after we got the mix done, we really thought we had perfected it pretty much where everything felt like a different piece of the song.
Mhm.
But Michael's thing was always, and I remember this from Tabloid Junkie, which was a simple song to mix.
Yeah.
Every time we'd go in, we'd go, how's it sound, Michael? Sounds good. Can we just turn the claps up a little bit? Yes. We turned the claps up. Okay, make me a DAT or make me a cassette. And
Yeah.
it's like, okay. Next day we'd come back. How's it sound, Mike? Sounds good. Can we just turn the claps up a little bit? We turn them up. And then you go, okay, make me a cassette. It's like, no, the claps are up. Like, aren't we done? Like,
Right.
we have other songs to mix.
Right.
But Michael was very meticulous and he could always tell when something had changed or something wasn't right.
Yeah.
And it was funny because on you guys' song, on History, after we had done the mix, everything was done. He went back in and he put the drums through the whole song because he liked the way those drums sounded. And it's
Yeah.
like, no, that wasn't the intent. The
Yeah.
intent was that each thing had a different thing.
Geniuses, man.
Oh man, that was crazy, man. But thank you for being a part of that.
No, thank you for letting us be a part of that.
Did
That
you
was-
ever perform that with him?
Never.
Yeah, because I
Never.
saw him in Hawaii. We went to the show in Hawaii, and it was funny. It was raining. It was outdoors, Aloha Stadium.
Mhm.
It's raining cats and dogs, right?
Mhm.
Michael hits the stage. The rain stops.
Of course it does.
Michael flies off at the end of the song after History, which was the last song he'd do was History. He'd put on a jetpack,
Sure.
and fly out the stadium.
Of course.
That was and literally
How else would Michael Jackson leave the
exactly
stadium?
right. When he flew off, the rain started back again.
Of course.
It was the nuttiest
Hello.
thing ever. But yeah, I didn't know whether you guys had ever performed that.
No,
live with him.
not once.
That's
but,
too bad that didn't happen.
Yeah,
That would have been cool.
But we've had good moments with Mike, and
Yeah.
that we'll save that on part 2
Aha.
of Jimmy Jam coming back and giving us a couple of things here and there.
Okay,
You know what I'm saying?
I like that. I
you
like
know.
that.
I will admit, Can't Stand the Rain made me run to the record store.
Mm.
When I heard that song playing on WDAS in Philadelphia,
Haha. Butterball.
'cause I need just that,
Mm-hmm.
I ran to the record store.
Yeah.
That part, Ralph's part,
Mhm.
it just okay, cool. They got me. Like If It Isn't Love was cool. And I was kind of hating a little bit because I was in a group myself and I was like, yeah, they cool, they cool. You know, and it's like, that's a nice record. It's cool. You know what I mean? But Can't You Stand the Rain made me run to the record store.
That was the one.
How did you feel making the Heartbreak album? And especially Can You Stand the Rain? Because that was all the stars aligning.
Yeah.
That was something special. Did you know it? Like, did you feel it as the process of recording this record came about?
We always just wanted it to feel good coming out of our studio. We never knew whether it was going to be successful or not. We just knew whether it felt good to us. But here's the thing. Most people think about record production in the technical side of it, the sound and the microphones you use and all that kind of stuff. But here's the human part of it. The Johnny Gill joining New Edition part of the group, that was Gerald Busby that did that. Rest in peace, Gerald.
Rest in peace, Gerald.
That was Gerald Busby's idea because Gerald was looking to sign a male artist because he had gone to Motown at that point. He was looking to sign a male artist. And he called Terry and me and he said, you know, who do you think I should sign? And he had a bunch of names of different people. And we said, we think you should sign Johnny Gill. And he said, Johnny Gill? And we said, yeah. And he said, well, why? And I said, because he's got a great voice, but he was always too young for his voice.
Yeah.
Now he's 20 or whatever he was at the time. I said, now it's perfect, you know? And he said, wow. He said, if I sign him, will you produce him? And we said, yeah, of course we will.
Yeah.
He said, okay, cool. So he signed Johnny Gill. So then when I got the word that Johnny was going to be in the group from, I think maybe Biv or somebody I ran into at a concert. Johnny's in the group. Ain't that great? And for me as a producer, it was like, yeah, but it's problem solving now. Because how do we get Johnny into the group, into a group that's already so established with what they do, right? How do we do that? So what we did was they came to Minneapolis, and this is what I say about the human part of production.
Yeah.
We got in a conference room together. Ralph and Ricky, I think, were against Johnny joining the group, and Biv and Ronnie wanted Johnny in the group. So they're each sitting on opposite sides of the table. Johnny sitting at the end of the table. I started the meeting by saying, okay, I just want to say, Johnny, you're not going to do any singing on this record. Or you're not going to sing any leads on this record, is what I said. And he said, I didn't know what he was going to say. But I just wanted to say that. And he said, that's cool. I'm a team player, man. Whatever you need me to do.
Wow.
Well, as soon as he said that, of course, Ronnie and Bill were cool, but now Ricky and Ralph were cool.
Interesting.
Because they were like, okay, he's a team player. Okay, cool. But if that meeting hadn't happened, Heartbreak wouldn't have happened.
Wow.
Because that album, we never would have been able to record that album unless everybody was on the same page.
Correct.
So that meeting was to put everybody on the same page.
Correct.
What ended up happening from that, which was the coolest thing, was Ralph and Johnny turned into the Mutual Admiration Society for each other.
Sure.
Because Johnny would go in and sing for 15 minutes and kill it.
Yeah.
And Ralph would go, man, how's he do that? Right?
Right.
Then Ralph would go in there for 5 hours and do all the background parts and all the leads. And Johnny would go, how's he do that? And so it brought them together. So in our minds, as we're doing the record, we're going, how do we introduce Johnny into the group? And luckily, Gerald listened to us.
Yeah.
We said, and Brooke was up there too.
Yeah, sure.
So Brooke was great because Brooke did all the choreography. So like on If It Isn't Love, the reason that it has the all that stuff is for choreography.
Yeah.
He was like, give me some stuff to do some choreography. So it was like, okay, cool. So that's the way the record evolved. So the cool thing was, on If It Isn't Love, we said, If It Isn't Love should be the first single because it's the most New Edition sounding record. So that was our, here's New Edition, new record, right?
Yep.
The second single should be Not My Kind of Girl because it has a little bit of Johnny vocal in it.
Yep.
Not a lot.
You're
but
kind of
just
weaning
enough,
everybody
but just
in.
kind of people get used to hearing that sonic of
Yeah.
Johnny's voice against those backgrounds and all that stuff.
Weaning them on to him.
The third single should be Can You Stand the Rain? And the effect of that single for me is the same as when I heard You Make Me Feel Brand New by the Stylistics for the first time.
Mm.
So Russell Tompkins Jr., the lead singer of the Stylistics with the beautiful falsetto voice, all the records had that sound to them, right? And then I remember listening to the radio one day and I heard, my love, I'll never know my love. And I'm like listening and I'm going, who is this? And then I heard, only you, then when I needed a friend. And I said,
see the connection.
It's the Stylistics.
I see the connection. Yeah, sure.
It's the Stylistics. So that for us was the blueprint to
Johnny
On
singing.
a Perfect Day.
Yes.
People would go, who is that?
Yes.
And then your part.
Yes.
I need some. Oh, it's New Edition.
Right.
So that's how we were able to integrate him
Genius.
into the group.
Genius.
Through the series of the 3 singles and releasing them in that order.
Genius.
So I just say it's a lot more than just the song. And then the other thing was, well, Ricky's part was, because I loved Is This the End?
Mm-hmm.
I love when I want to know, is this the end?
Right.
So I wanted him to do his part.
Yes.
I know, all the days won't be perfect.
Yes.
Tell me, can you stand it? Like I had to have him do that part.
Yes.
And then Biv was always, man, find me something to do on this record.
Right.
And Biv's part probably took the longest. Come on, baby, let's go get wet. Because the timing, right? And he was like, come on, baby. And I said, no, it's too rushed, man. Wait till the song settles. And I was trying to point at him, right? And he would be like, come on, baby. Oh, wait, do it again. Come on, baby. No, it's too slow. Come on, baby. We were in there like hours.
That's so
trying
Mike.
to get that one little part,
That's
man.
so Mike. That's so vivid. It's too.
And then and then we wanted to have John. And then at the end, so then we had them cross each other. So Johnny just went, oh.
Yeah.
And then Ralph did the Can You Stand the Rain, right?
Yeah.
It was just kind of the record that kind of solidified Johnny in the group and, turned into obviously a huge record.
Fun fact, Can't Stand the Rain is also the song that got us our deal.
That's what you sang for the audition, right?
That's what we sang for Mike in front of him. And he introduced us to Gerald. We sang it for him and got us our deal. And we sang Can't Stand the Rain by Boys to Men. 2 songs written by Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis.
Yep.
Ain't that crazy?
Yep.
Okay. One last question.
Yes, sir.
In this form, in this time, the older Jimmy Jam tell the younger Jimmy Jam. If you had a chance to talk to the younger version of yourself, what would you tell him?
Well, the one thing I always think about now that I'm mature, that I learned is don't put energy into things you can't control. Put all your energy, recognize the things you can control. Like I can control going in the studio and making a song. I can't control the response to the song.
Correct.
Whether people like it, whether radio plays it, whether retail, whether it streams nowadays. I can't control any of that.
Correct.
So what I can control is how the song sounds coming out of the studio. And it's a good metaphor for life also. I can't control the things that are out of my hands. So that's God's plan. So I think, and I think the thing that really, we talked about it earlier, the snowstorm in Atlanta, which was the worst day of our lives probably, because it was, why is this happening to us? Like, what did we do? We took all the precautions to be on time. We're on the earliest flight out. We're all of these things, and all of a sudden a snowstorm stops us. But that snowstorm is what got us fired, or as Terry likes to say, freed from the time. And the night we got fired, we mixed our first big record, which was Just Be Good to Me.
God's plan.
God's plan. So I think that's the thing is when I tell people a lot of times, one of the metaphors I use, and I'm the king of the bad, analogies and stuff, but I always say a lot of times people get up to a wall and they're standing in front of the wall and they're trying to beat through the wall. Like this damn wall's in front of me. And I always tell people, if you're standing at a wall and you can't figure it out, take a couple steps back. You look to your left, might be a window over there. Look to your right, might be a door over there. And I think that's the thing I've learned is the frustration part is being at that wall and not being able to figure it out. So I think that my younger self, that would have been a great lesson to know, is to just don't try to control things that are out of your control. Just go with it. But the things that are in your control, just do the best you can at those things.
Your perception on stage is different from the perception in the crowd.
Yes, exactly right.
And on that note, I would like to do something. All right?
Yep.
Now, I was going to do a few records, but
Okay.
I'm just going to do one.
Okay.
Let's see. Say again? Are you sure you know what this is?
Yeah.
Here I lay all alone, toss and turn, longing for some of your tender love. I'm waiting for the right moment to come so I can thank you for the tender love you're giving to me. Tender love, something tender, only close to you. Baby, I surrender. Hey, ooh, ooh, ooh.
Wow. I don't sing.
But
Trust me.
yeah.
Trust me. No,
Hey.
they know.
It's gonna be part 2, where we're gonna talk about Jimmy Jam's, like his demo tracks. We're gonna talk about those, because that's a lot to talk about.
By the way, the funniest thing on that, and just not a teaser for part 2, but when I sang on the second verse of that song, and I didn't know what the words were, because I don't think we had we
No,
done words yet?
I don't
We hadn't
think you
done
did.
words yet.
It was like, so
Many nights I dreamed of you. But the funny thing was, y'all did it though.
Yes, we did.
Because I know y'all were like, we ain't saying it like that.
Yeah, right.
It's like, but you sang it exactly.
Yeah, we knew how to interpret.
yeah,
We're interpreters of
yes.
demos and stuff like
Yeah.
that. No, listen, it was a funny moment, but one of the most beautiful songs we've ever been blessed to record.
Yeah.
And tell Terry I said what's up.
I will.
And
Absolutely will.
love to you guys. And there will be a part 2. That is if he's not too busy.
Awesome.
But it would be great to talk more, because again, we haven't even touched the surface on how many stories and how many anecdotes and how many things that we can get into with this man. Ladies and gentlemen, please give it up once again for Mr. James Harris III, aka Jimmy Jam. Come on, give it up.
Thank you, guys.
Hey y'all, and that was On That Note. Hope you guys enjoyed it, and if you did, here's a couple more videos for you to check out. Do not forget to like, comment, and subscribe.